Chair, we lost your audio. You may have muted yourself. If you don't mind starting over.
Sorry, all the way? Okay, sorry about that. Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Trish Shadeen. I'm the chair for the Southeastern Regional Advisory Council. I'd like to welcome everybody this evening to the meeting on April 15th, 2020. Due to COVID-19 and associated safety guidelines put in place by the CDC, the state of Utah, and local health departments, the Utah Division of Wildlife will be conducting their RAC meetings, usually currently in a fully electronic format. This meeting format was approved through the executive order by the governor and will be used in place of an in-person public meeting that has usually occurred around the state. To start the meeting, I'd like to conduct a roll call for both regional advisory members and division members. So at this time, and please just say you're here, and it might just take a second as everybody has to turn on and off their microphones. So Jeff Christensen.
I'm here.
Great. Steve Duke.
I'm here.
Thank you. Scoot Flannery. He's there. Thank you.
I'll back up. I'm here.
Okay, great. Jay Skyman. Was here. Ace, are you there? I saw him earlier, so we'll see if he jumps in here. Kent Johnson.
I'm here.
Okay, great. Yeah, just make sure you guys unmute when you, and it is difficult, I know, to remember that. Eric Luke. Oh, that's right. We're having some technical difficulties. Thank you. Darren Olson.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Eric just wrote in that he is here. Kurt Clare.
I'm here.
Brad Richmond.
I'm here.
Thank you, Brad. Helene Taylor. I have not seen Helene so far. Todd Thorne.
Here.
Thank you. Dana Truman. Just make sure you unmute, Dana. I can see her, so. Okay, great, thanks. Lynn Sitterud.
Yes, I'm here.
Thanks, Lynn. Garish Willis. Thank you, Garish.
Yep.
And myself. So on the division side, we've got Kobe Jones, the big game coordinator. Thank you. Chad Wilson, private lands, public wildlife coordinator.
I'm here.
Thank you. Brad Crompton, Southeast Regional Assistant Wildlife Manager.
I'm here.
Thank you. Darren, if I just, can you say your last name for me? I always slaughter it. Games Mammal Program Coordinator. DeBloy.
DeBloy. I'm here. DeBloy.
Sorry about that. My last name is, I'm in the same realm. All right. We don't have those. Marty Bushman, Attorney General's Office.
I am here.
Thanks, Marty. We've already done those. Guy Wallace, Southeastern Wildlife Manager.
I'm here.
Thank you. Chris Wood is here with me. He's the Regional Supervisor.
Here.
He's here. Nikita Hansen, Habitat Manager. Thank you.
Here.
Thanks. Wade Paskett, Wildlife Biologist.
Here.
Dustin Mitchell, Wildlife Biologist. I saw him earlier. He's here. Okay. Joe Christensen, Wildlife Biologist.
I'm here.
And then we have a couple wildlife board members. We have Randy Dirth that is here and Kevin Albrecht. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then Randy.
Yep, I'm here.
Thank you. And I think we're good to go. I just want to make sure, Jace, are you there? He was here earlier, but
And Trish, this is Dana. Can you hear me now?
I can't. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, great. All right. So I'd like to also make a special thank you to the countless many of other people that have worked really hard to get tonight's meeting going. Currently, we have Mike Christensen helping us with audio, and we really appreciate that. Let me just go ahead and review the meeting procedures for tonight. And remember, it's going to be a little bit difficult. It's going to be herding cats. So just keep that in mind. Just to make sure everybody is on tonight's page, we will adhere to the following format for each of tonight's agenda items. I will announce the agenda item. We will not listen to presentations from the DWR. All RAC members have been asked to view those recorded presentations online prior to the meeting. The regional supervisor will then summarize the public comments received on that agenda item. I will then call for questions, and remember, those are just questions from RAC members on those agenda items. After questions, I will call for RAC discussion, including any clarification or additional information RAC members may request. I will keep track of your input and concerns. We will be sure to revisit each of them for discussion motions, including any seconds, followed by a roll call vote. And at the beginning, if there are agenda items that we have concern about, I will actually, when we go through asking for questions and asking for comments, I'll actually do that via roll call. And I think that will make things flow a little easier. I can see most of your faces, but and so in theory, I could have you wave your hand, but I can't see everybody, so we really can't use that system. We will repeat this process for every agenda item. This process will be used during during previous meetings and has worked quite well. I please ask that all RAC members please respect one another's opinions and opportunities to speak tonight. If more than one of you are wishing to speak at once, please be patient while I kind of move through and sort those things out. Please also be sure to clearly communicate your questions or concerns so we can work through tonight's meeting effectively, efficiently, and respectfully. And let's also make sure that when you go to ask a question or state a comment, that you state your name so that we get that in the recording clearly. With those introductory and housekeeping items taken care of, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I want to do is get an approval of agenda and minutes. Approval of agenda and minutes. So, do I have somebody that wants to make a motion on that?
Trish, this is Kent. I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda and the minutes.
Great. I have a motion by Kent Johnson that we approve the agenda and minutes. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
And I have Garish with a second on that. Thank you so much. So next on the agenda, we have the regional board meeting update, and Kent went to that for me. So I'm going to go ahead and have him give you an update on that at this time.
Thanks, Trish. Kent Johnson. Most of us probably already know what happened and what the outcome was with the bear stuff at the wildlife board meeting. Recap, they did approve a 16 dog limit, and they approved to have only 2 non-resident via drawing on the Book Cliffs, LaSalle's, and San Juan, all 3 for the spring pursuit permit, and that was unanimous. And they voted also to leave that as unlimited for residents. And they voted to implement a pursuit ethics course and add ethics to taking the bear orientation course online. And the wolf plan passed unanimously. Brine shrimp plan was unanimous. There was some discussion there on the dramatic loss of deer in the Book Cliffs a little bit. We lost 2,000 deer on the Book Cliffs in 1 year, so they did have a little bit of discussion about that. And then there was a motion to increase 10% on all units, the numbers of bear tags for kill permits, with the exceptions of Beaver, Boulder, Book Cliffs, and Chalk Creek, and those were increased by 25%. excluding any units without at least 10 permits. And that's kind of about the gist of it. A summary. Anything else you want to add, Chris?
I don't think so. I think you covered it.
Okay, thanks. I'm done, Chris.
Okay, are there any questions for Kent? Anything you guys want him to elaborate on? Okay, so I think at this time, we're gonna go ahead and have the regional update by Chris Wood.
Good evening. Thanks for being here tonight. Just a few things to report on today. Our offices are open. We are working from home, and we're doing, but our staff working, and they're going to need different distancing measures. That's not happening, and still we do recommend that our constituents, our hunters and fishermen, we recommend that they become aware of the local county orders that are out there. Our region has some pretty restrictive orders that have been our county health departments. So we ask people to be aware of those and to obey those in the counties where you reside and in the counties that you hunt and fish. Especially as the season goes on, those county orders could change, and we encourage you to become aware of them and follow them as the months and weeks progress. As an agency, we did make some changes. We allowed turkey and bear hunters to surrender their permits.
Chris, sorry, before you keep going, like, we're only catching like every third word.
Okay, let me move to.
Okay.
I've had problems with using this before on another committee, and you'll be able to we'll be able to hear you better.
Okay, so should I start all over again, or should I just continue where I was?
Please start.
Continue?
I would say please start over because we didn't get your whole message, Chris. Thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Our offices are open. Our front counter staff is working every day. A lot of our biologists and our office personnel are working from home, but those who need to come into our office to buy licenses or receive services that we provide as an agency can come into our 5 regional offices, and we have someone there helping them. Our field work is progressing. We have essential field work that happens this time of year, and we've received permission to conduct that field work as long as proper social distancing measures are happening, and we're maintaining those as an agency. Hunting and fishing is not shut down. You can still hunt and fish. We do ask our hunters and fishermen to understand and learn the different county health orders and to become aware of them and follow them as this COVID-19 issue progresses. Those can change weekly, but and we ask our hunters and fishermen to obey those county orders. As a result of some of those orders, we did have some disruption to our turkey and bear seasons. And so as an agency, we allowed bear hunters and turkey hunters to surrender their permits, and they had until April 10th to do so. That was last Friday. Also last Friday was an emergency board meeting. The board met and they introduced and passed a proposal that would allow hunters who could not hunt due to COVID-19 and allowed them to apply for a variance through our variance process. And if that variance is granted through our variance process, their permits, for any permit that ends by July 1st, could be extended for another year. But again, that's a case-by-case basis. And we encourage hunters who have questions about their permits with a hunt that ends before July 1st to contact our Salt Lake office, and they can help them through that variance process. We have our officer, Devin Shirley, who works the Book Cliffs and the Bullfrog District. He has transferred to the Utah County District, and we are going to receive 2 new officers in our region, which we're really excited about. Cheyenne Hudson, these 2 officers are coming straight out of post, and Cheyenne Hudson is from West Virginia. She went to the University of Pittsburgh and did some hunting in the West, fell in love with the West, and this is her dream job, is to be a conservation officer in Utah. And so her first district will be the Bullfrog, Lake Powell area and the Henry Mountains. Also, an officer named Brian Dennis will be joining us as well. His first area will be the East Carbon District. We're excited to have him. He's from the University of Maryland, and similar to Cheyenne, just fell in love with the West and wants to have a career here. So we're stoked that they're going to be in our region. Our districts will be full after they arrive around July 1st. We have some poaching cases that are being investigated by our law enforcement section. We have one in East Carbon. You might have seen that press release that hit the newspaper yesterday. A man poached a buck deer. And then we've also had 2 poached deer near the airport area in Carbon County that we're also investigating. Our officers in the southern part of this region in San Juan County have been assisting the sheriff's office, who have been enforcing their county health order. So they've been talking to a lot of campers and recreationists out, and we've been assisting them. And you probably have read this in the newspaper as well, but Lake Powell is closed for the time being. National Park Service closed that recreation area. And so we're working with them closely to ensure that when it opens up, we have people on the boat ramps decontaminating boats and educating people about quagga mussel. Our biologists have been working on sage-grouse let counts, deer classification. We're treating collars on deer mortalities, doing eagle nest surveys, and pinyon jay surveys. And we're also going to start writing our deer management plans for those units that are for a renewal in the upcoming months. You probably know this, the spring bear hunts are going now, so are the limited entry turkey hunts. The turkey hunt goes through the 30th of the month. And then from our outreach section, all of our events are canceled for right now. So we're keeping an eye on the COVID-19 situation, and as we're allowed to hold events, we'll start replanning those. But we respect the guidelines that have been given by our state and our national leaders, and we're following those strictly. Hunter education is still happening. It's all gone online. If you want more information about that, it's on our web page on the front page. There's more information about how people can continue their hunter education, including their field day, doing it online and through submitting records to our instructors virtually. Our community fisheries are not being stocked at this point, but other waters throughout the region are being stocked. So fishing is still a great activity to do, as long as you follow the local health orders. And that's all I got. Any questions for me? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, we're just gonna have to be sliding back and forth because one of the microphones is not working. So please just be kind of hang tough with us on that. So at this time, we want to go ahead and start in with our first main action item, which is bucks, bulls, and once in a lifetime. As mentioned, hopefully you have already watched the presentation, you've gone through your packet, you have that information. And what I want to go ahead and do at this point is I'm going to have Chris, if that's okay, you're going to go ahead and give a summary of the public comments. Is that correct? Okay. And so for every agenda item, we'll go ahead and Chris will be giving us any kind of summary of public comments before we move into questions. And I did miss a couple people. I'm sorry. I wanted to go ahead and welcome Dax. I made him come tonight. I don't think I mentioned you on the first round. Sorry about that. And Kent. So thanks so much for being here. I wanted Dax to be here from the Northeastern region to address any Book Cliffs issues as they arise. So.
And our Lieutenant, Roger Kerstetter, is also on the line too. If there's any law enforcement questions tonight, Roger's here. So thank you, Roger. You all received the public comments and the surveys a few days ago after they were wrapped up. I'll just summarize the percentages here. We did have 19 people fill out our public survey. And of those 19 people, 13 people made comments about bucks, bulls, and once in a lifetime recommendations. Hopefully you've read those comments. I will not try to summarize those, but I will summarize the percentages here. For this proposal, 32% of the people supported the proposal, 42% of the people opposed the proposal, and 26% were neutral on the proposal.
Okay, so at this time, what we want to go ahead and do is take questions from the RAC. So questions for Covey, and I know at one point, one thing that Covey also wants to do is kind of maybe share his screen for a moment and give us some additional information regarding deer. But let's go. Do you want to do that now, Covey, or do you want us to wait?
That's fine. I can do it now. I think one of the biggest things that we have had come up is, we cut a lot of deer permits this year, over 9,000 deer permits. And so the rationale as to why and how those cuts were made and where they were made has come up several times. And one of the big changes we did this year to be more proactive, everybody will remember that we brought forward a new deer plan in November. The division has always managed with buck-doe ratio trend. And that's not unlike all of our Western states. Am I coming through clear? Can everybody hear me clearly? So, every state that manages mule deer uses those metrics. They use buck-doe ratio for your average and trend to determine at what level we can harvest and not negatively impact a population. It also helps determine quality. The ratio is the more older age class bucks there are on the landscape, and you obviously take that data post-season. But understanding that our general season units are not just driven by that post-season ratio, by the fawns coming in that next year. So obviously the number of deer you have on the landscape, your buck-doe ratio, but then in general season units, those fawns coming in are very, very important. So we took into account fawn and adult survival, and the new deer plan allows us to do that. And what it allows us to do is, instead of looking back and saying, oh, well, last year we issued too many permits, let's cut back this year moving forward. Now we're projecting forward and saying, okay, if we issue this many permits, survival estimates, and there's some estimation. I'm going to have Kent Hersey explain some of that in a second after we go into the model, but what should be our buck-doe ratio after the hunt? And let me show you what we did to do that. Let me bring that up really quick. So we'll just present screen and show everybody what that looks like. And I think the one that a lot of folks are interested in is the manti. So let's walk through the manti scenario and show everybody. And then maybe if there are other units we want to see, we can look at those too. The first line here, is everybody seeing that now on their screens? Okay, the first line here goes through what the buck-doe ratios on the manti have been the last 5 years. Now, 2017, obviously a blip there, but overall, pretty constant. 2015 is capturing that big increase in deer that we had. And we captured that big increase in deer. We also captured that with a lot of permits. We were at 9,200. So looking back on the manti over the last 4 years, over 1,000 permits, 1,100 permits. Okay, but this last year we came in at 16.3. So we came in above the middle of what we're managing for. We're managing for 15 to 17. So that looks good. To counter these fawn-doe ratios. And this data from 2019, that's taken in November and December of 2019. And so that's this last year's data. Survival of these animals, of this 56.4 fawns per 100 does. Those are the ones coming in. Those will be your yearling bucks on the landscape this next year. Really quickly, another thing that's taken into account, obviously, is population size. Not necessarily where we are in terms of population objective, don't affect that, but we take into account population size because that helps us know how many bucks we can remove from the landscape. Looking at adult survival, and the Manti has colors on it. It's blue if it's actual, it's yellow if it's representative. And so the Manti physically has colors on the unit. We have a lot of colors on the unit. We're monitoring survival there. And it's been pretty stable. This is both North and South Manti. You know, 82, 88, that's a good one. We like to see that number above 85, at 85. But again, we're really close there. Now, fawn survival is more erratic, but fawn survival is a function of fawn weight, obviously. So the bigger you are when we catch you in December, the more you weigh, the better chance you have at wintering well. So this 0.39, this is looking back. This is looking back at the fawns that we captured in December of 2018, and that's coming off that hard drought. And so those fawns, good fawn doe ratio that year, those fawns were skinny and they didn't survive as well. Right. And so remember, fawn doe ratio is one of the things that can be highly erratic. You know, it can be as high as 90% some years and as low as 6% some years. It's not nearly as consistent as adult survival. Fawns are impacted by climate. So we took all that data forward or tried to project forward based on our weights, based on our adult doe weights, based on our fawn weights. We had a really fat deer come in off the Manti this year. And so we're anticipating those survival. We're anticipating that it's not out of the question to hit that 88%. Now, if we look at the Manti, we're at 92% on adult doe survival, and we're making it through the most crucial time right now. Now, fawn survival, again, we're anticipating that'll be high at 75%. We've seen it at 75% before, if we look back just a couple years. And right now, on fawn survival on the Manti, we're at 86%. Now, Kent, I'm going to turn just a second before we go through the rest of the sheet. Can you talk about the weights on the Manti and how we made those predictions, how we made some of those predictions about percent survival? And then I'll take it back over. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good. Can you stop presenting and I'll show some of the stuff we have? Okay. So this graph that you're looking at here, this is the fawn survival. We've been collecting data on fawn weight and fawn survival since December of 15 when we switched over to the GPS collars. We actually have survival data going back to 2009, but to put it all together with the weights has been 15. And so each one of these lines represents fawn survival throughout a year. And the x-axis here is the time since December 1. So we started our captures on December 1, and so that's kind of how we standardize everything. And we look at how long since December 1 those animals live. And every time one of the animals dies, it does a step down on these. And so around day 100 is when we start seeing things level off. A little after this is around March 5, March 10, somewhere in there, which is when we start, you know, fawns are starting to get through the winter, but you're still seeing that transition over to green feed. And so we will see animals start tipping then as well. But once they make it past that crucial part, it seems like on this unit in particular, they really level off. So for this year, weights were really good in December, and I'll show that in a second. But what we want to follow is this pink line. We made it through the hardest part really well. We're still running upwards in the mid 80s on survival, and we're hitting that period where we every other time have seen this nice level off. And so that's why when you see Kobe showing that sheet, we're predicting that 75%, which does seem high, but based on the current data we're seeing, it seems very reasonable for this area. And so going with exactly what we're seeing on this unit, pay attention to this row right here. This is the fawn weights that we've been seeing on the Wasatch Manti area that we're monitoring for the last years. And overall, this area does do very well. They produce some pretty big fawns compared to what we see in the other parts of the state. And this year we were at 70.2 pounds, which is outstanding. It's the highest we've seen in 5 years and haven't seen that high since 2015. So last year when they had that drought, we came in 3 pounds lighter, which overall doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But for a fawn, it is quite a big deal. And then when you couple that with the fact that we had a hard winter last year versus an average winter this year, that's what drives the difference between 39% survival and this 75% that we're predicting, and is actually what we saw in 2017 as well. So these are the data we're collecting and how we're just trying to use them to forecast for it. And it's not 100% perfect. There's definitely some error associated with it, but based on what we've seen in the past, we feel it's very reasonable.
Perfect. Thank you, Kent. So let's look at the rest of the sheet now. I'll bring mine back up. So based on all that information, we left permits alone. We chose to leave permits alone. What we do is we calculate what our postseason buck-doe ratio should look like with the level of harvest that we've typically seen on that unit. So the Manti, the population has been relatively stable. Now that doesn't mean that every area that everybody hunts is stable. You know, the division manages at a unit level. It doesn't mean that there aren't portions of that unit, canyons, specific sites that are struggling. But at a unit level, we've been pretty stable. Under every scenario, high success, average success, and low success, we should come into that buck-doe ratio. And ability with the number of deer there, we should have higher success this year. Collect that data here. So permits issued, harvest, and then percent success. And so we take the 5-year average, the 5-year low, and the 5-year high, project that down here with what we have on the landscape. As Kent mentioned, we feel like we've done a good job at nailing this on the Manti. If there are other units you'd like to see, I would like to mention there's one that we probably missed it on a little bit. It could have gone either way. On the cache. And the cache, we were looking good to come in at over 60% survival. And the last 3 weeks previous, as we went through that hard time where it goes either way, those deer just weren't quite fat enough to make it. Saw that dump down to high 40s. And if you have any questions about any of these later, go ahead and bring those up. But we can look at any unit. It really makes some units and some recommendations that I've had people say this doesn't make sense. You know, this is one in particular. Why would you cut deer permits on the oak or Stansberries when the unit is above or in the objective? Why are you cutting permits from 3,200 to 2,000? And the rationale is because 39 fawns per 100 does, really poor adult survival, a huge population drop, and poor fawn survival with predicted poor fawn survival. You have to cut those in order to, even under low success, which we know will have low success because we have fewer deer on the landscape, come into your buck-doe ratio. Anyway, that's all. Thank you.
Kobe Scoot, if you don't mind showing us San Juan Abajo.
No, that's perfect.
And LaSalle's.
The reason being, Kobe, is I know that we've had a lot of specific questions about the San Juan Abajo unit.
Yeah. And Dustin, any specific questions on the unit? Dustin would love to address those. He likes to talk. He doesn't get to talk as much as he likes to. San Juan first. Now this is the Abajo, the general season unit. quite a drop in population. If you look back over a couple years, we've lost a lot of deer there. The buck-doe ratio slightly below the objective. 3-year average is okay, but the trend and the ratio are concerning, obviously. Last year's adult survival, we know that this unit's been hit hard by drought for several years. And so if we look at adult survival, mid-70s, there's not a better way to put it. That just stinks. And then fawn survival, 41, 0, and 27. Those are really hard numbers. And that accounts for that drop in population. Things look good there this year. So we should have, even though our fawn doe ratio is a little low at 44, fawn survival looks like it's going to be good. Adult survival looks like it's going to be good. That means with a cut from 2750 down to 2200, somewhere in that average to low success population objective. And so we feel comfortable. And success is a function of deer on the landscape, right? You have on the landscape, the higher the success is. And the less bucks, the fewer bucks you have on the landscape, the lower success is. So if we look at a year, buck-doe ratios, these 2 years, your 40% success in these 3 years with high buck-doe ratios, almost 36, 39, 37. Then when your buck-doe ratio falls, you're down 31. And so that's how we took into account should be. And then the other one you wanted to look at was the LaSalle's.
Yes, please.
Can I ask you a question about this one first, Kobe? I noticed
Sure.
on the other one that you showed us as an example, both the high success projection and an average success both fall under the low end of where we want to be, 15 to 17, which it is right now. What tag allotment would support keeping even a high success projection within that 15 to 17 buck-to-doe ratio? I don't know if you could go through that.
Yeah, could you run that really quick and then get back to us in a minute, and we can answer that one for you, Scott. Yeah, and obviously we're using the best data we have to estimate as best we can. Feel like we're going to have. We know we won't have 40% success on this unit this year. Not going to happen under the conditions, the current conditions. But we can get those numbers. The problem is that if you're on some of these units, if we manipulate the numbers to be at 15 or 16 here, you'll have to give us what low success would look like, and that could blow us completely out of the range. For example, if we were at low success on this one, we're outside of the range.
Yeah. So
go ahead, Ken.
I have those numbers. So if we went to 1,900 permits, it'd be 14.8 with high success. But it's also predicated on the fact that we got those survival numbers exactly right as well. So right now, when you're looking at the San Juan, we're running extremely high fawn survival. We only predicted 70, but it's actually predicting higher than that. We're currently running in the upper 80s, so we could easily actually come at 75, if not more than that. And just as an example of what the difference of fawn weights mean, we saw before the drought, we were running mid-60s on the fawn weights on the San Juan. In the drought in 2017, we were down to 51, and then followed by 55 and 18. We shot up to 68.6 this past year. And instead of getting the 20 and 30% survivals, we're expecting those 70 plus. And that's really what's going to be driving this. Same thing with the adults. The adults were skinny, not very productive, very fat this year, and we expect really high survival in that as well.
Yeah. Does that answer your question, Scott?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Hey, Kobe.
Yeah.
I'd also just mention that this is showing a 1 year buck-to-doe value, and we're managing on a 3 year. So if you go up above that and bump these into the 17, you'll probably be above where we are managing to.
Yeah. And obviously, you know, we are aiming to manage within the guidelines of the plan. We're working hard to do that, and offer opportunities still. Comments, half the people are mad that we're cutting so many tags, and half the people are mad that we're not cutting enough. So we must be somewhere in the right realm. That one first or next.
Hey, Kobe.
Yes, sir.
Looking at the numbers of fawns that are collared, it's fairly small sample size. It seems like, you know, just a few fawns fatalities could change that anticipated survival rate fairly considerably. Is that pretty accurate?
I'm having a hard time understanding the question. So is your concern that the number of fawns collared is not representative of what's going on in the unit?
Well, it's a fairly small sample size. You know, on the San Juan, there's only 18 current fawns collared. You know, a couple of them die. That changes that 70% down to 60 or lower. You know, and so it wouldn't take a lot of to change that fawn survival rate. Looks like we may be anticipating or expecting the highest that we might get, and looking at past history, I know that the different factors that, you know, create that, especially the weight. And I'm thrilled to see the effort that's going into looking into the future. But I just a little concerned that what would that do by changing that fawn survival rate from 0.7 to say 0.6 or 0.5? How much does that change those numbers?
It changes. This is Eric, right?
Yes. Sorry.
It changes it a lot. When you start to lose those fawns, it changes a lot. But we have to lean on the best possible data we have, Eric, and that's what we're doing. And there'll be
I would just also add that, you know, what we're doing with our phones is balancing cost, effort, and ability to get things done. And so we settled on 20. The reason you see 18 on the San Juan is either due to collar failure right after capture or capture-related mortalities that we don't include. But what we're trying to do is balance the ability to, you know, cost and effort and to get the best data we can. We could certainly, you know, for adults, because the models are more sensitive to that parameter, we aim for higher sample sizes and we want that up around 50. But since we have to catch these fawns annually, it's a lot of effort, a lot of cost involved. We went with the 20 to get a good rough estimate on the. Now, that being said, on the Wasatch Manti, we actually have 30 colors out there because it is such a large area, including multiple regions. But you know, obviously, every fawn that dies counts for roughly 5% in that scenario. But keep in mind, we're past the period of high mortality, so we would expect minimal mortality from this point. Also, when we look at those fawn weights, that indicates that we would expect high survival as well.
Thank you, Ken. I think those are on. And Eric, in a perfect world, there are those that make fun of Utah and say that we have collared everything. In a perfect world, I think we sure try to with bighorn sheep, it seems like sometimes, but we're working hard to get the appropriate number of collars out there.
Do you want
this is the SAL data, and then we can move on with whatever other questions we have. The cut, you know, on LaSalle's is cut from 1,800 to 16, down to 1,300. We should come into that. And again, you'd anticipate success when you have fewer bucks and fewer deer on the landscape.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and, if this is okay, I'm going to move through just a roll call as to questions for Covey or Kent, or Dustin, whomever you want to ask questions of. And if you don't have a question, you can just quickly say no, and we'll just move through. Please don't just make up questions because your name is being called. Make sure that you have questions that are relevant to the topic. So anything with bucks, bulls, and once in a lifetime. So Jeff, do you have any questions?
I do. I'd like to see some data on the 9 mile, please. Did you hear that? Do we have any data, Colby?
Oh, Colby, your microphone's off. I think he heard you, Jeff. Hang on.
Sorry, it wasn't letting me unmute for a second. Okay.
So just looking through your 3-year average, in 2007, we basically had a 28 buck to doe ratio. We fell 2 points in 2018, and then we fell a bunch in 2019. We still fall in the, I guess, target, but we've got a.
It's the first time you've actually been close to the target.
Okay.
And this is where the hard thing, Jeff, is like, to being in school where you're exceeding your expectations is better. The 9 mile is a tough unit. There's a lot of private property on the 9 mile and other issues, a lot of the mountaintops, but we still fall. I recommend 1650. And with that, under every scenario, we're still within the target.
Okay, but we're falling pretty abruptly. So
we did fall it.
I mean, you go through and there's a handful there that are falling as abruptly, and I think we've done some changes in those areas. I guess my question is why are we not trying to get ahead of it, basically? Do we want to cut that back to where we're not crashing and falling below our area objective?
The short answer, Jeff, is that this does catch it, and we're not going to go under the predictions. We shouldn't go below. Under every scenario, we should be within or above still.
So, and maybe we need to get Brad there. Not too long ago, we raised that number. Do we know how long ago we raised that?
Here, would you like to speak to this as well?
Yeah, Brad Crompton from the Southeast region. Yeah, we raised it 2 years ago and we added that early hunt. I think we added 200 permits to it, if I recall correctly. So that's that recent increase. The only one thing, is our survival stuff, our predicted survival. We use book cliff data, and the fawn survival right now on adult and fawn survival on the book cliffs is really, really high, but it is slightly below what we predict, what we guessed, but pretty close. I think the book cliff fawn survival right now is 70%, 69% instead of the 75 we predicted. Other than that, everything falls within what we're shooting for. And it's always the 9 mile units are a tricky unit just because it's so diverse. The Tavaputs Plateau seems to be dry with lower production and high buck doe ratios, where the stuff is a lot higher production. It's there's deer coming from a lot of different areas that make up this unit.
Okay. I just it kind of raises a flag to me that we're gonna fall below that fairly soon. Why not try to get ahead of it? Drop that. Brad, do you know how many tags you increased a couple years ago?
I believe it was 200.
In 2017?
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, so that's guessing, but
So then remind me, where is our target buck to doe ratio?
It's 18 to 20 bucks per 100 does is what we're shooting for.
18 to 20?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like we increased from 1,300 to 1,650 from 2017 to 2019.
So we went up 350 tags.
We went to 1,550 in 18, and then we added 100 last year. But again, Jeff, like we said, under every scenario, it looked like we'll be outside of the objective, and that is us trying to get ahead of it.
But you're right on the verge of being out of it. If you're going from 20 to 18, you're on the verge of 19. Okay. All right. That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Steve, do you have a question? Steve, do?
I do. Yes, thank you. I just want to say I've appreciated what I've heard so far. My question is about the success rate. You talked about there on your presentation about high success, average success, low success. I'm just curious how the division, how you gather that success rate. Is it a random surveys, or how confident are you in your success rates?
So that's a really good question. I would say that we use bootstrapping statistics to determine how many random samples we have to have really good numbers on harvest success. So yeah, we do survey hunters. On small hunts, obviously the margin of error is a lot higher. So if you're talking a limited entry outcome with only 20 permits, it's not perfect there, or a small cow hunt somewhere. On general season hunts, the data's very high confidence, low margin of error. On a general season unit with thousands of permits, we know.
So is that but do you do like a random survey, or like what's your percentage?
Yes.
So like on the San Juan unit, you would say there's this many permits, and you choose a percentage of those that you randomly choose. Is that how you do that?
Percentage of the random percentage of permits that we sample. Ken, you have those sample numbers in front of you?
Yeah, just looking at San Juan Any Weapon, we surveyed 324 people with a harvest of 349 confident. Our standard error on that is 26.7.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Scoot, do you have any questions?
All right, now, are we just talking general season stuff right now? Are we going to get into limited entry after this?
No, we're talking all of Bucks, Bulls, and Once in a Lifetime. We want to do it all in one swath.
Gotcha. Okay. So I guess I do have a question then, if that's all right. The numbers on the Elk Ridge have obviously drastically been decreasing by 100 deer a year. We're down to 600 deer on Elk Ridge. Tag numbers are staying pretty stagnant, not really fluctuating much. Maybe ask a biologist what the reasoning behind that is, and if it's possible to look at cutting those a little bit more.
Yeah, would you like to take that one, Dustin?
I'd love to take that one. So yeah, so that one's compared to a general season where we're mostly looking at those yearling and younger bucks that we're harvesting. On the Elk Ridge unit, for example, we're targeting mature bucks. With the drought that we've had the last couple of years, that would be the case if we were after those younger bucks like a general season unit. But from what we've seen on our classification, we've still got those older bucks that we want to target. But probably next year or in 2 years, we'll look at cutting tags. But this year, I feel like we've got what we need for that unit.
Thanks, Dustin.
Yeah, one other thing too, our age on that unit has been about 4.5 years old for the last, since 2015. We've consistently kept that age class in the harvested bucks that we have out there. So it's pretty similar to just under the Henrys and those premium limited entry units. But like I said, in the next year or two, we'd see that age class go down. And so we'll probably look at cuts then.
Are you good with that, Scoop?
Yeah, thank you, Dustin.
Jace, do you have any questions? Jace, can you hear me? Okay, so I'm going to move on to Kent. Johnson, do you have any questions?
Not right now.
Okay, thank you. Eric, Luke.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions. Kobe, on them, I'm curious to know how much, if you change that fawn survival rate on your model from say 75% to 65%, how much does that change your anticipated buck to doe ratio on your harvest?
I can get that for you in just a second, or if Kent has the sheet up, could you pull that really quick, Kent?
And then I guess, yeah, question, that's an interesting one for me, because as I look at the past history, I just feel like we're, I don't know, and I appreciate that this has been very educational for me to go through this model and see everything. And I appreciate the time that you guys have taken to show us that. But as we look at past history, I know that the data shows this year it's being much better. But I'd like to see what that 10% change in the fawn survival, how much that affects those numbers.
So Eric, this is Kent. Yeah, so it'll change it by $1.50 or $2, depending on where per 100 does, that is, depending on what success you use. But I guess what I want to emphasize is this is a tool that we're using, and it goes with what the biologist's judgment and how they feel things are going to be seen on this unit and what they're seeing from how healthy the animals are and all that put together. What we don't want to do is get into this plug and chug exercise where it just kind of spits out a number and it kind of takes out the thinking behind it. So just, it certainly, as we lower those numbers, it will affect things, and it is driven by that. But I also want to reiterate, we're past the time where we typically see that mortality, and dropping 25% survival at this stage would be quite drastic and something we have not seen before.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so Darren, do you have any questions?
Yes. So, Covey, I guess I appreciate seeing those numbers, the data from those collar. I'd like to hope that some of the work we're doing up on the forest is making a difference there, as we're seeing some of those weights increase. And so that's a good thing. On another note, I know people are frustrated when they go out there and hunt, the fact that they don't see the lack of deer, I guess, in general. So my question is this, not to get into every single count, but as I understand it, these averages for buck to doe ratio, 15 to 17, I don't know how many counts there are total that factor into this, and not to go over every single one of those numbers, but I guess maybe the way to answer this or ask this question is, do we have any counts that would skew that either high or maybe on the contrary on the low? Meaning, if we have a count of 25 buck to doe ratio in one area that contributes to or increases that count in, and or if we have any that were low. So I guess that's a question for Brad or Wade.
I could start that with a statewide perspective on, and that is every unit to get rid of some of that bias or error, minimum of 400 does. We get that on every unit. Now, some units it's not possible. or these large general season units, we're way, way above that. And so our margin of error goes way down. Brad, could you speak to, do you want to hear, Darren, just specifically the manti, the numbers we classified? And this would just be the east side because Rusty classifies on the west side as well. Brad or Wade?
Yeah, typically, I just take care of the northeast portion of the manti and classify anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 deer. In generally, the buck-doe ratios that I get compared to what Wade and Rusty get are pretty comparable. Sometimes the buck-doe ratio is a little lower on the west side of the manti than over here, which is a bit baffling just because all the deer are up on top of the mountain in the summer and during the hunting seasons. Okay, portions that you classify where there's lots of private land up on the summer range, your buck-doe ratio tends to be a little bit higher. But in general, the fawn-doe ratios and buck-doe ratios, once you pool it all, everything's is fairly similar. This year was a little bit of an anomaly where we were a little bit different, but for the most part, we kept pretty similar.
And I guess that's my point, is if I know a lot of people will say if you want to find a buck or kill a buck, your chances are higher in the valley than up on the mountain. So do we have counts that are really high in the valley or private land count, and maybe our mountain counts are low, but over average across the unit, it comes up that we're in range? I guess that's kind of where I'm getting at.
To clarify something, we do our very best not to count any of the valley deer. We wait till the migrating deer come down. We're not trying to count the deer that live down in the canyon, because I think that would bias things. And what you can't control is you don't know exactly where all these deer are coming from. Some years it snows a little bit, and a lot of these deer that sometimes are on private lands during the hunt are on public lands, and they're available to the public. So, if they're on public lands when we count them, you just can't predict, all the deer where they're at in October.
Well, and Darren, to add to that, we have to classify during the rut. That migration, classify during the rut. It's a pooled sample. I'm sure we get some valley deer, a lot of mountain deer that are coming down too. And that's the system. If Utah does anything that's a little different from the other states, some of the other states and classify from the air. Now it's really hard to get accurate fawn-doe ratios from the air. We all agree, and from what we've seen, if we were to go to that method, underestimating our buck-doe ratio as to what it would be if we flew it. Hang out some of the harder, some of those, and so it would, by default, then we probably show them what we actually have on the landscape. But that's what we're used to too. It's what we've done for 50 years.
Okay, I'm going to move on. I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is Wade. I'm the biologist on the Southeast Manti. I'd just like to chime in. Both Darren and Eric have been up with me classifying, and so maybe to answer maybe Darren's question, to be a little bit more specific on comparison of deer at a higher elevation. So we'll go up on the horn and classify deer, and when you compare that to the deer that are down in the valley that have migrated down, and most of the deer by the time we have classified on the Southeast Manti have come off the mountain, and so but the buck-to-doe ratio is comparable on the horn as it is down in the valley. So I hope that kind of helps.
And that number was 4,000 deer this year on the Manti. Between east, west, north, and south, we classified 4,000 animals.
All right.
Okay, so let's move on. Kirk, do you have any questions?
Oh, nothing that hasn't already been covered.
Okay, thank you very much. Todd, do you have any questions?
No.
Thanks, Todd. Brad?
No.
Thank you. Dina? Dana, I can't hear you. I can tell that you, yeah, her mic's on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, we'll get this working. I did have a question. I can see that a lot of data has been used to make these permit recommendations, and I really appreciate that. And I can also understand the importance to manage, like within the deer management plan and the buck-doe ratios. And so you kind of briefly mentioned something about the data for fawn survival on the cache might be showing a little bit of a change. I'm wondering if now is a good time to suggest a change on the permit numbers, and if it is there a recommendation to address any of the new data that you guys have for the cache unit or any other units?
Dana, that's a really good question. Yeah, I mentioned that. This is how proactive we're trying to be. And again, we're not going to be perfect every time.
Right.
We miss it on the cache. We're down around high 40% survival. That leaves us is we needed to cut an additional 800 permits to come into the buck-doe ratio there based on the new projection. If that were something that's an area where the division could support an additional cut. But where the data demonstrates it, we'll support it. And I want everybody on the RAC to understand one other thing. We cut a lot of permits. Some units our highest was 46% of the permits on the unit to try to come into the buck-doe ratios. This isn't perfect. It's the most proactive we've ever been. And I want the RAC to understand too that things are good. We're going to be recommending big increases too. We manage the plan, and we try to offer balance, opportunity, and quality. And but yeah, an additional 800 permits on the cache would.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I feel like a lot of effort went into those management plans. So I just wanted to make sure that we are kind of understanding that and managing to those plans. So thank you.
And we made Dana sit on the last one, so she knows.
That is true. Thanks.
Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Garish?
No.
Okay, thank you so much. So at this point, we're through the questions. So we're going to move on to the discussion period. I think I'm going to do it the same way with the roll call. We won't do this on every agenda item. We're really just kind of move. Oh, Ethan, did I forget you? Kent. I think I forgot you. Johnson.
No, you didn't forget me.
Okay, so I'm making sure. Sorry about that. Okay, but I think on just a couple big agenda items, I'm gonna move through in a roll call fashion. So what I want to do now is just any discussion and or clarification questions, and then after that we'll go ahead and move into making any, if we have specific motions and or accepting the recommendations as presented. So let's go ahead and move through. So Jeff, do you have any discussion and or comments or clarification questions? Okay, thank you so much. Steve?
No.
Thank you. Scoot?
No.
These are easy. Kent?
Yeah, I have a comment. I have some concern with some of these general season units where we're chronically low in population and trending down, where we're adding the late muzzleloader tags during the rut. And I mean, these are going to be rut hunts where the deer are very visible. And with our muzzleloader hunt in Utah is no longer a primitive weapons hunt. It boils down to a single shot rifle hunt. And I know that from my own experience. I took a buck with my quote unquote muzzleloader last year on the run at 208 yards. Mate, and my son laser ranged it as I was making the shot. So I have a concern that we're going to overkill on those hunts on some of these units. especially looking on units that are trending down. Ones I'm familiar with would be like the LaSalle and the San Juan Abajo, both. I'm real skeptical about that, and I think we ought to rethink that and maybe not do that on some of those units that are trending down like that in the overall population. We have an objective of 13,000 deer on the LaSalle Mountains, and we're currently at 5,000 and trending down. And as we looked at the data, and the fawn to doe ratios are chronically very low on the LaSalle Mountains. As I was looking at that data when Colby was presenting it, and thank you for presenting that, Colby. I think that if we kill off too many bucks, and if we look at like a 25% success rate with 1,300 permits, we're killing 50% of the bucks if we hit 25%. And that's kind of scary, because what handful of does are left may not even be getting bred.
So I could, those late season muzzleloaders, and I could just speak to how we came up with those numbers. In the plan, they're set from 5 to 0.05, half a percent. So 0.005% of the permits. And so we tried to develop a criteria on how we do this. When we originally wrote the plan differently, we said, no, biologically they're insignificant. And so these numbers will all be set at either 5 or half a percent, whichever is greater. And then at the board changed that to say, no, they could be set from 5 to half a percent. And it's the division's discretion or biologist's discretion. And obviously to be commented on, weighed in by RAC and board as well. And so we tried to develop a criteria under which criteria we'd recommend which on those late season muzzleloader hunts. And after sitting in a room and talking back and forth with the biologist, it just became clear that there was a lot of different sentiment on this. And so we didn't develop a criteria. We just said, you know what? You know your units best. They be social. They're not biological in nature. We're not harvesting enough animals to make a difference. But socially, they really matter to people. And people either really love them or really dislike them, or love them but don't love them this year. Or there's a lot of different reasons, a lot of different thoughts on those few late season limited entry muzzleloader permits. Biologists, recommended by the biologists, and nobody touched them. But obviously, again, those permits are social. And so it's a great opportunity, but there's a lot for the RAC to wade through and think about there, as Ken has mentioned.
Are you okay with that, Ken?
That was good. Thank you, Colby.
Okay.
Trish, could I add a comment to Kent's real quick? Just a concern. This is Scoot.
Yeah.
A concern that I have on the San Juan with that as well is that they also have a Navajo Nation hunt that allows 30 tags. They're hunting them in December. It's basically just a little bit further down country on an extension of our winter ranges for the deer that are coming from the Abajos. So I fear that we're kind of double dipping on some of those deer. We're getting them early, right after the rifle season. And then they're moving down a little bit further and getting hammered again by Navajo Nation tags. Okay. So that's a concern I have with that number. I'd like to see it more around the minimum of 5.
Okay, thank you for that addition. Eric, do you have any additional comments that you'd like to make or clarification questions?
Yeah, 2 big concerns. I know the San Juan Abajo is one. If we're going to look at the actual data, I think we ought to look at, because that one you had it as 75% fawn survival. Actual data is 69%. Now's the time to take a look at that and maybe make some adjustments if it's needed. On the Manti, I think we need to look at a social aspect on that one, because I know the data shows leaving the tags at where they're at. I can tell you that we are getting absolutely pummeled by the public because the perception is that we are doing absolutely nothing. The manti is at 64% of the population objectives, which is completely sad to say the least. And I know that the data shows that killing bucks doesn't do anything to grow the herd. But from a social aspect, I think that it would go a long ways with the public perception to see some reduction in tags there.
Okay, thank you.
Can I mention one thing? This is Dustin.
Yes.
Eric, did you mention that the San Juan was at 69% survival? Because it should be 89% is what we're at, and we were predicting 70%. If I heard that right from you.
That's correct, Dustin. 89% fawn survival and 100% adult doe survival.
So Eric, do you have any more questions or comments? Okay, so Darren, do you have any more questions or comments?
No, I do not.
Thank you so much. Kirk.
Just kind of to echo what Eric said, I think there is, the numbers make sense. What Kobe's shown, it makes sense why the recommendations, initially I saw that manti and was like, what? I mean, because if you just look at the kind of the headline, it doesn't make any sense. But I can see where it's coming. But I do think that there is, I've heard people that I've heard from and reading the comments that do kind of see that and think, well, why aren't we reducing here when, X unit looks exactly the same and we're crashing that one down. And that same thing applies. Nobody's really mentioned it for the limited entry bull as well. It's on the age objective is high, but it is on the way down. And so I know that there's, kind of a social pressure there to cut a few of those tags, giving kind of the same thing like Jeff was talking about on the 9 mile, worrying about it crashing down too low, even because the age objective is still high. It's above where the plan is. But there is some concern that it'll crash down lower than we really want it. And I mean, to be honest, we've gotten used to it being high. And so it's kind of scary to think about it being lower. But that is the objective. So those are the only comments I have.
Okay, thank you. Todd.
So I guess my comment with the manti, the people I've heard from or been involved with is it's more of an opportunity hunt. We've cut almost 1,100, 1,200 tags over the last 2 years. So to keep it as we did last year for the opportunity, the manti isn't for a big trophy deer. So to keep it as it is and allow for the opportunity is what I look at.
Okay. Thank you. Dana.
Yes, I just wondered if I could ask maybe what other RACs thought about that late season muzzleloader hunt. I didn't watch the other RACs and didn't know if you might be able to remind me or tell me what other RACs decided. Did they support the?
Yeah,
okay.
That's a great question, Dana. It really depends on the RAC. Some of them left them all alone. Central Region was really frustrated because this is social. In Central Region, they felt like the biggest problem is that the way we're recommending isn't fair. and because it's completely social. So Central Region made a motion to what the deer plan said and set them all at half a percent. Do this, that's fine. Let's just be fair. It's not fair that some units are only giving 5 and some units are giving 0.5%. Not even detectable. It's based on the number of general season permits. Let's just set them all at 0.5%. And so that was their motion. You know, another RACs are a little more conservative, but overall they've left them where they are.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Colby, sorry to interrupt. This is Jeff. If I remember right, when we kicked the late season muzzleloader hunts in, there was 2 criteria in setting those in motion. Number 1, we had to meet or exceed our buck to doe ratio. And then we either had to be on a level or incline on that, didn't we?
So no, under the previous plan, it was just the first criteria. We had to, and it wasn't even meet, Jeff. It was we had to exceed. You had to be exceeding the buck doe ratio to have one of those under the previous plan. At this plan, we realized that we set, we kind of set ourselves up. We didn't realize it when we wrote it, where we'd go to try to increase general season permits, and we'd have folks tell us, "Oh no, you can't increase those because we want to get rid of this hunt." And we just said, we can't even manage the plan now because we created this monster. And so when we rewrote it, we didn't include that language about meet or exceed. Again, very few permits, but social, and it's something for the RAC for you guys to work through, Jeff.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff, specifically on the 9 mile under this new recommendation, this decreased permits. The 9 mile was offering, I get this right. The 9 mile was offering,
I think it was 30 before and it's down to 8 now.
because half at 8 is the most you can offer under the new plan.
Okay.
So it lost 22
And I
permits.
get it, and I appreciate it. I just I spent a little bit of time in the field, and we're not seeing them. So that's my concern.
Okay, Lynn, do you have any additional questions or comments?
No.
Okay, and Garish? Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to revisit a couple of the just concerns or comments that were brought up. And if we want to make specific motions as to them, that's great. And if not, then we need to look at the entire recommendation as presented. So we definitely have concerns with that late season muzzleloader hunt. We've heard a couple people speak to that. We have concerns about the San Juan Abajo numbers. I've heard that a few times. And then obviously the Manti. And so do I have any motions at this point?
Trish, this is Kent. Actually, I'd like to can I make a motion of 2 objects, or do you want just one thing per motion and make it
Let's just do one at a time, I think. And it's going to be slightly cumbersome, but I think this is our biggest agenda item. And so, we'll get through it.
Okay. Given my concerns over the population of the deer on the LaSalle Mountains and looking at the possibility of, if we have favorable weather during that hunt, we could end up below objective on there. And we're already on a herd that's probably the most struggling deer herd in the state. I would suggest, and I would make a motion that we reduce the overall number of permits from 1,300 as presented by the division down to 1,000 total for all the hunts on the LaSalle Mountains. And then we'll just call that good for now.
Okay, so, and this is on the general season, obviously.
Yes.
So I have a motion by Kent Johnson to reduce the general season deer tags from 1,300 to 1,000. Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
And that's Garish? Okay, so I have a second by Garish. And so at this point, I'm going to go through and do a quick roll call, and you have to say yes or no. Are you keeping track of this? Sorry, just give me 1 second here. So yay or nay. And so real quick, Jeff,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Scoop,
Yes.
Kent. Oh,
Yes.
sorry. Thank you. Eric,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Kirk,
Yes.
Brad.
Yes.
Thank you, Todd.
Yes.
Dana,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
and Garish.
Yes.
Okay, so that motion passed unanimously. And so, Kent, you had another one.
I think I'll pass on that.
Okay.
That will pass, so I don't think I need to worry about my other one.
Okay, thank
Trish, this is
Trish,
Jeff.
can I?
you. Okay, Jeff.
I would like to make a motion that on the 9-mile unit, we drop that from 1650 to 1350.
Okay. And is that a general season hunt? Sorry.
That is a general season hunt.
Thank you, Jeff.
And my reason being is I think we need to flatten that out. That is on a fairly steep draw.
That's okay. So I have a motion by Jeff Christensen on the general season 9-mile hunt to drop the recommended deer tags from 1650 to 1350. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second that.
And who is that?
Lynn?
Excuse me?
Lynn.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, just make sure you guys tell me who you are so that I can get that down on record. And so again, I'm just going to quickly go through on a vote on that. Jeff?
Trish,
Yes.
could I interject just 1 minute? This is Brad.
Okay.
If there is a motion that is presented, don't we have a window to discuss that before we vote? If a motion is proposed, then
Sure.
isn't it open for discussion before we vote?
That's accurate. It's motion proposed, discussion on the motion, and then a vote.
I agree with Brad.
I know. Yes, I agree with you. I will state that we've done quite a long period of discussion. And so I'm not dissuading you if you do definitely have a concern to jump in, but we have had a fairly long period of questions and discussion.
Hey, Trish,
So-
this is Kent. Can I interject for a second?
Sure.
One thing you could do is you go through your roll call, ask anybody if they have any discussion on it,
Okay.
any comments to further make, and then their vote as well.
Okay. Okay. So we'll just assume that that's kind of the case, if that's okay. Okay. So Jeff,
Yes.
Do you want to discuss on the motion?
well, when I get to Brad, I'm assuming he has a discussion point.
Okay.
If that's okay?
Well,
This is Brad again. I'm sorry. I actually didn't have discussion on that one, but the previous one, I just was curious about a little bit of clarification. So I was gonna interject that before I did vote, which would work good. But but on this specific one, I don't have anything.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Yep. I will do that. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and move.
I think you should ask.
Okay. All right. So at this time, I'll ask him. Sorry, I've been on about 5 hours of these types of things today already. So, and then I've got quite a few more hours to go. So do we have any more discussion on Jeff's proposal on the 9-mile before I take a call on that? Okay. All right. So Steve.
Yes.
Thank you. Scoot.
Yes.
Kent.
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
Darren.
Yes.
Kirk.
Yes.
Brad.
Yes.
Thank you. Todd.
Yes.
Dana.
No.
Lynn.
Yes.
And Garish.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. So do we have any other motions?
Trish, I'd like to make
Yeah.
a motion. This is Scoot.
Okay.
On the San Juan unit, based on what we've heard and what we've seen, we have a steady dropping deer population. buck-to-doe ratio fell below objective. We have a low adult survival. We have very low fawn survival. When we asked what number would put the minimum, or sorry, if we were to have a high success ratio, but it would put it underneath objective, assuming that's linear, if it was average, it would still put us under the top end of the objective at like 16.8. Therefore, I'd like to move that we drop the tags. Right now, it's a drop of 500 from last year. I would like to make a motion that we drop the tags, 850 tags, to a total of 1,900 tags on the San Juan Abajo.
Okay. And so I'm going to go ahead. So I have a motion by Scoot on the San Juan Abajo. The drop was, they're recommending 500 decrease, and he wants to move that to 850. Do I have a second on that motion?
This is
Okay, I have a second by Kent, if that's okay. And do I have any discussion on that before we take a vote? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move into a vote. Jeff?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Kent?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Thank you, Darren.
Yes.
Burke?
Yeah.
Brad? Brad? Richmond?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Thank you. That's okay. Todd?
Yes.
Dana?
No.
Lynn?
Yes.
And Garish?
Yep.
Did you say yes, Garish?
I said yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Okay, at this point, do we have any other motions? I think we've covered a number.
I have a motion, Trish.
Yeah, and who is this?
This is Eric.
Okay, great.
I make a motion that we cut the tags on the Manti by 500, basically to satisfy the social issue of the public and the perception. But that's my motion.
And this is in the general season? Okay, great.
Yes.
So we have,
Also reiterate the fact that I know it doesn't show that we're going to grow deer, but that deer herd is at 64% of our population objective.
okay, thank you, Eric. So we have a motion by Eric Luke to cut the tags on the general season deer hunt on the Manti by 500. Is that what you said? Eric?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry about that. I wrote everything except for the number. Do we have a second on that motion?
This is Darren. I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Darren. We have a second by Darren Olson. Do we have any discussion at this time?
Just for everybody on the call, what that goes from what to what?
What's the number on that curve? You decrease it by 500. Like, what is the number?
From 81 to 76?
Yep, 8176. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call real quick. Jeff?
Yes.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Kent?
Yes.
Rick? Eric? Luke?
Yes.
Thank you. Darren?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
No.
Thank you. Dana?
No.
Lynn?
Yes.
And Garish?
No.
Okay, good. But I think it's still passed. Thank you. We don't Passed 9-3. All right, and so then do we have any more motions or a motion to,
Yes, Trish, this is Dana.
okay, great.
Based on the biology that I heard, it sounds like there's been some like new data on the fawn survival for the cash unit, and there's a recommendation to decrease the tags. And so I guess my motion would be to propose a 800 tag decrease on the cash unit based on the new data for fawn survival.
And do you know what the original decrease that they were asking for?
Yeah, Dana, you're asking for an additional 800 or an 800 total?
I would be asking for what the recommendation from Division of Wildlife was based on the data, and I thought it was an additional 800. But
That's correct, Dana. It's an additional 800.
And that's on the general season deer hunt?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I have a motion by Dana Truman to ask for an additional 800 tag decrease on the cash general season deer hunt. Do I have a second on that motion?
This is Kirk. I'll second it.
Thank you. I have a second by Kirk. Is there any discussion on that motion? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take a vote here. So Jeff,
No.
Steve,
Yes.
Scoop,
Yes.
Kent,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Kirk,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Todd,
No.
Dana,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Garish. Garish?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so that passed. It looks like 10-2. So any additional motions?
I have another one. This is Eric.
Okay.
The bison archery hunt. Right now, they cut the tags. There's only one resident tag and one non-resident tag. In doing that,
On what unit?
I believe that's the Henry's unit, the buffalo archery hunt.
Okay.
So in doing that, we've taken away any incentive or bonus, anybody with max bonus points to have any opportunity. I would recommend that we add another resident archery bison tag to that hunt so that in the draw, there's at least one tag that goes to full bonus point holders. You're talking, but you're muted.
Sorry about
Tricia.
that. Great. So I have a recommendation by Eric Luke for the archery hunt on the Henrys. And I'm assuming you're just saying one additional resident tag?
Correct.
Okay, to add one additional resident tag to that hunt. Do I have a second on that motion?
This is Lynn. I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second by Lynn Sitterud. Do I have any discussion on that? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take a vote. Jeff? Jeff, are you there?
Sorry, I had my button off. Yes.
Thank you, Steve.
No.
Scoop?
Yes.
Kent?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Kirk?
Kind of a question. Can anybody from the division, is there downside to that? I mean, it's one permit with archery. Is there a big downside?
No, we've discussed that, and honestly, it's something that Wade can comment on this too, but it's not a big deal. Just give a bonus point. It's not going to do anything except for be more fair to the public. Wade, would you add anything to that?
No, it's something that was overlooked, and one permit will not have any really negative impact. So, yeah, we would support that.
Kirk?
I'll go with yes.
Thank you. Brad?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Thank you. Lynn?
Yes.
And Garish?
Yes.
So that passes 11-1. And then any other motions to wrap up Bucks Bulls Once in a Lifetime?
Trish, this is Eric.
Okay, great.
Go ahead, Eric.
I know there have been several sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife put in a recommendations, and there are several concerning bighorn sheep. Have you seen that recommendation that they have? Has the whole RAC seen that?
Yeah, I mean,
Remind us what it is. I'm sure we've seen it.
Well, there's 4 or 5 of them, and I don't know if we can handle them all at once or if we need to do them each separately. One of them is on the Fillmore Oak Creeks. They are recommending increasing the permits to 10 versus 14. The majority of the rams that were surveyed were young rams. So the consensus there is they want to give those rams a little more time to age before upping the permits. The other one was the Stansberry Mountains. The fact that this is a recovering herd and it's currently below objective, and they want to stay with 3 permits rather than raise it to 5 permits. On the Zion, they're recommending that the numbers stay the same as last year. Zion National Park, by all rights, is over their objective on their numbers of bighorn sheep, but the sheep are continuing to leave the park, and they supplement this for this reason and others. They'd ask that the permit numbers be kept at the same permit numbers as 2019. The Comparowitz, east and west, desert bighorn sheep. Both these units are close in overall herd size. The major difference between the west is far more accessible and than the east is, and so for that reason they're recommending that they switch the recommendations and issue 12 permits on the east and 8 permits on the west. And the Newfoundland ewes, California bighorn sheep, SFW supports the ewe hunts when there are no other options, but they do not support the proposed ewe hunt on the Newfoundland Mountains. They'd rather see these sheep move to the Stansberry unit, which is under objective. And in the Jack Creek, Rocky Mountain bighorn, SFW is recommending leaving the Jack Creek unit at the 2019 permit numbers, which is 3. Both the sportsman's permit and the statewide permit will be hunting this unit, along with last year's statewide permit that has received an extension. So that brings a potential of 7 rams being harvested on that unit in 1 year. It's a transitionary herd. Sheep are moving back and forth from the Ouray reservation, so they feel like 7 is too many.
So I'm going to make a recommendation, and it's okay. You can tell me that I'm completely out of line, and I'm okay with that.
Madam Chair, point of order. I don't see this on the agenda. Did I miss something?
It's a part of Bucks Bulls and Once in a Lifetime, so it is on the agenda because we're dealing with bighorns too. But I guess my recommendation is, because if we break this down into, I don't know how many motions that was, 5 or 6, and I'm not devaluing those recommendations. I'm just wondering if we should just deal with anything that's pertinent to this region, just to move through this agenda item. And Eric, you can tell me I'm out of line. If not, we're gonna have to break these down, each one into different motions.
Well, I don't know. Can we make a motion? I could make a motion to go with all those recommendations. If there's any concerns from other people on any of those, we could bring those up and address them, or we could talk about those beforehand and see if there's any opposition.
Make the motion, Eric.
There are some concerns from the division. Some of those are outside of the plan. The Compare What's West, for example, within the parameters of the plan to go that low. We're not even discussing that until the next topic. Obviously, some of these are fair, but we probably need to open back up the comment and discussion period and everything again as well.
Yeah, it is difficult in the sense that this wasn't brought up earlier in the comment and then when we were discussing things, and so we've moved now onto the motion phase, and so we're gonna have to back up.
Eric, make your motion and see where it lays.
Fair enough statement.
I'll just make a motion that we accept those recommendations as stated by the Sportsman for Fish and Wildlife.
Regarding bighorn sheep. Okay, so I have a motion by Eric Luke to accept SFW's recommendation on bighorn sheep numbers as presented, or bighorn sheep, permit numbers. Do we have a second on that motion?
Trish, let me amend that motion. Let's take out the U-hunt because that is a different subject that will be addressed later on.
You're gonna have to reword that motion then. If you want a portion of it and then another portion of it.
So we'll accept, make a motion, we accept the SFW's proposal for the Fillmore Oak Creek, the Stansberry Mountain, the Zion Desert Bighorn, the Caparowitz, and the Jack Creek units as presented.
Okay. Do I have a second on that motion? As presented by SFW, thank you.
This is Lynn, I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a second by Lynn. Do we have any discussion on that?
Yeah, this is Brad. I don't feel like I can make an informed decision on this without seeing any presentation from the DWR on it. And I haven't seen any public comment on it as well. And so I don't feel comfortable voting on something that I'm totally uninformed on. And I won't make a motion beyond that, but I would like to see this tabled right now till further data is shown. So that's just my comments.
Okay. So, Brad, just a comment that when we get into the vote, please feel free to vote no, because you feel that you're not informed. And I think that that's a completely valid point. Okay, any more comments before I take a vote? Okay, Jeff.
I'll support him.
Steve?
No, we need more information.
Scoop?
No.
Thank you. Kent?
No.
Eric?
Yes.
Darren?
No.
Kirk?
No.
Brad?
No.
Todd?
No.
Dana?
No.
Lynn?
Yes.
And Garish?
No.
Thank you. Okay, so that motion fails 9-3. Okay. And so do we have any more motions on Bucks, Bulls, Once in a Lifetime?
Trish, this is Dana. Do we need to make a motion to accept the DWR's proposal as is?
Do I look like a bobblehead?
Okay, yes, you do. Well, I would like to make a motion then to accept the rest of the Division of Wildlife's proposal.
Great. So I have a motion by Dana Truman to accept the remainder of Bucks, Bulls, and Once in a Lifetime as presented. Do I have a second on that?
This is Brad. I'll second it.
Okay, so I have a second by Brad Richmond, and I'm going to just quickly go through again. Jeff.
We have some discussion on the motion.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry, discussion.
I feel like we jumped right to that without allowing for any other motions to happen.
Who? I'm sorry, I didn't hear who's talking.
Scoot had mentioned that maybe we needed to look at more details.
Okay.
No, not necessarily more details. I just feel like this is kind of a conclusion motion for the whole thing, and I still had one motion that I wanted to make before we do that.
Okay. All right. Yes, it was a conclusion. Yes. So go ahead, Scoot.
So can I make a motion while hers is still on the table?
Yeah. Is that okay to do that, or do I have to backtrack?
Was there a second?
There was a second. Yep.
I can.
Rescind their motion?
Yeah.
Does she want to rescind it?
Can you rescind that, Dana?
Absolutely. I will rescind the motion so we can hear Scoot's ideas.
Thank you.
I will make this short.
Okay, great.
Since the San Juan unit is unique, the San Juan Abajo, as far as having the Navajo Nation tags during the rut that are targeting some large mature deer of the same wintering herd that we would be hunting with the late muzzleloader tags, I would recommend, and I would make a motion that we go with a minimum of 5 late season muzzleloader tags for the San Juan Abajo unit, as opposed to the 0.5%. That would be a reduction of 6 tags.
Okay, so I have a motion by Scoot on the late season muzzleloader hunt on the San Juan Abajo unit to limit that to 5 tags. Is that correct? Am I saying that correct, Scoot?
Yes, that's the minimum.
Okay. And do I have a second on that?
This is Kent. I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second by Kent. Any discussion? So I'm going to take a vote. Jeff?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Kent?
Yes.
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Garish?
Yes.
And it appears that passed unanimously. Okay, are there any other small motions before we move into one that would be concluding this agenda item?
Can I make just one comment and ask Brad from the Fish and Game? Brad, do you feel like just one component of ERIC should be brought back up again on just the Jack Creek? Are you concerned with the number of, along with SFW, on just Jack Creek alone?
This is Brad with the Division of Wildlife. The recommendation we submitted is within the management framework. It's on the high end. It was to provide a little bit more opportunity. But yeah, there is always that opportunity that the more hunters are afield when we have the sportsman's tag and the statewide tag and things like that. So there would be additional harvests on this unit. But yeah, our management framework is somewhat conservative that way. So if you want to discuss it, you can. But that's how we kind of came up with the recommendation.
So do you like your recommendation, or do you like Eric's recommendation on just Jack Creek alone?
That's a social issue at this point, and it's up to you.
Okay, so any more motions? Dana?
Can I bring mine back we'll approve the remainder of the Division of Wildlife's recommendations for this subject.
Okay, great. So I have a motion by Dana Truman to accept the remainder of Bucks, Bulls, and Once in a Lifetime as presented. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second it. This is Brad.
Thank you. I have a second by Brad Richmond. Any other comments? Okay, so let's take a quick vote. Jeff?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Luke?
Yes.
Kent? Eric?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Darren.
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Dana,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
and Girish.
Yep.
Okay, it looks like that passed unanimously. So we are done with the 5th agenda item. Only 6 more to go. So now we're going to move on to antlerless permit recommendations. First, I'm going to go ahead and have Chris summarize public comments.
Again, we had 19 people respond to our survey. We had 5 people leave comments about the antlerless recommendations. Hopefully you've read those comments. Of the 19 people that responded to this survey, 37% support the proposal, 26% oppose the proposal, and 37 are neutral.
All right, so at this time, and remember we have Dax here from the Northeastern region to address any book cliffs issues. So if this time, if we have any questions, and I am going to kind of open it up, so just be cognizant that there may be some overlaps. You just have to be just patient if you have to wait your turn. Okay, so do we have any questions for biologists regarding antlerless permits?
This is Kent. Dax, I have questions about the book cliffs. We're looking at massive decreases in that elk herd on the book cliffs over the last few years. And I was questioning do you believe that that's sustainable to increase from 90 all the way to 255 cow tags on a herd that is just, I mean, it's dying off up there. Do you think that is something that's a really good idea or sustainable?
Yeah, so let me see if I can answer your question. The elk herd is actually not dying off. Our overall population numbers, they're not really growing, but it's not really shrinking either. It's kind of just stable, kind of stagnant. And that's actually part of the rationale for this hunt. Last year, we went out, we started a big study in the book cliffs. We've got a lot of concerns and issues we're looking at on that unit. Elk is part of it, deer is part of it, predators are part of it, the bison is part of it. Feral horses, livestock grazing, looking at a lot of different things out there. And one of the things we did was put vaginal implant transmitters in cow elk to monitor calving, timing, and predation on newborn calves. And it was really concerning. We found that most of the elk, a huge number of the elk we were catching, were really old. And only 53% of the elk that we caught were pregnant. And that's almost unheard of in elk. 80, 90% pregnancy rates are the norm in elk, almost everywhere else that it's ever been measured. And we were in the middle of a drought. So that was fall of 18, early winter of 18. That was something that was pretty concerning to us. We formed a committee at the direction of the Wildlife Board to look at issues in the book cliffs and see if there were ways we could address some of those issues. Some of the findings from that committee involved doing a forage analysis on our summer range in the book cliffs. And we found that we probably are over allocated on summer range when you add in all the different mouths that are feeding on that range, both wildlife, domestic livestock, and then feral animals like the horses. So this year, when we are as part of that committee, one of the things we decided we wanted to do was look at that elk population and see if we could figure out why it was stagnant, why it wasn't growing, why we were seeing such a low pregnancy rate and this old age class. And so one of the things we're proposing for this year is, this increase in cow tags. And there's a couple reasons for that. One reason is because if we do disproportionately have a whole bunch of really old cows in that population that aren't productive, then we could eliminate some of those cows. If we have a cow hunt and we harvest more cows, if you had a domestic cow herd with a bunch of old cows that weren't having calves anymore, those are good ones to turn into hamburger. So it's kind of that same idea with the elk. The other thing that we will be doing is sending tooth envelopes to the cow hunters and asking them to take the teeth off these cows so that we can get them aged and see if we really do have this disproportionate, number of old cows in that population. And I don't know that it's something that is meant to be sustainable or meant to be done for a long period of time. The idea is to get an idea of what kind of age age structure we have in that elk population, and then see where we're at and see if we need to focus efforts on, you know, habitat improvement, expansion of habitat, if it's a predation issue. And so it's going to answer some questions and help us know where we need to focus efforts in having a healthy and a sustainable elk population in the Book Cliffs.
Just to follow up on a little bit of what Dax said too, you know, we're talking permits, and the population estimate post season 2019 is 5,500 animals. So this is really going to help us get herd demographics. It's not intended to reduce this population. It's intended to help us get herd demographics. Help us get a more productive herd. And this is true wildlife management. What we're trying to do right now is manage that population to see if we can make it more productive. We don't have a lot of tools to do that. Would you add anything to that, Dax?
Yeah, I guess the scale is important. If you're looking at a population of 5,000 plus elk, to kill 200 is not going to make a gigantic difference in what happens with that population. But, you know, we are committed to trying to have a healthy elk population, healthy deer population, you know, have a healthy summer range down there. And some of the data that we're looking at indicates that we're seeing, you know, density dependence issues, perhaps, you know, that maybe we have populations that are approaching a carrying capacity. We also observed really high predation rates. And so, you know, something like this can help us maybe tease out a little better. Are we coming up against limiting factors that are being imposed by predators? Or do we have limiting factors that are being imposed by habitat, you know, and drought? And maybe it's a combination, but those are some of the questions we're hoping that we can answer by doing this.
And so Dax, are you going to break those antlerless tags down into the various subunits within the Book Cliffs, I'm assuming? So San Arroyo, you know,
So
how do you?
Most of these tags are focused in the roadless area and then the Bitter Creek unit, so the north. I can't remember. Joe's on the call. I can't remember exactly how many, or if we even had any on the south. But most of this focus was on the, you know, we're hoping for the harvest on the summer range and in the roadless area.
And
Well, I have more comments about that, but that's my question, and it's answered.
Okay,
I'll be back later.
Okay, great. Do we have any more questions on the antlerless permitting recommendations? So at this point, I think I'm going to move into comments. Kent, do you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, again, I'm still with the Book Cliffs. Looking at that, Dax stated that herd is static, but your objective, your estimate over 1 year is dropped by 1,000 head from 6,500 last year at this time to 5,500 this year at this time. I'm personally kind of questioning taking that many cows out of a herd that's in decline. And I hunt that mountain a lot. I guide up there. My brother guides up there. We know a lot of other guides up there. And there are places where we used to see decent elk numbers and consistently seeing elk that, I mean, there's not even tracks now. They're just gone. And the roadless area is, I mean, it's way bad there. And, you know, I don't know. I'm not, you know, I don't have all the data and I'm not a biologist, but it's possible in the roadless area that the problem is crowding out with horses and bison. And I think that is maybe part of what's going on with that elk herd. I don't know. I see very few cows with the bulls. I mean, during the hunts the early season hunt during the rut with a rifle, we're seeing mature herd bulls with 6 or 8 cows, and that's it. Where usually they would have 10 or 12 per bull is what we'd typically seen up there. So I'm concerned with, killing off quite so many. I understand now, based on Dax's answers for me, the reasoning behind taking some cows and collecting some data. But maybe it would be a better idea to take fewer cows and take them targeted specific areas where you just take a handful of cows from a specific area, like pick drainages or something where you typically have the elk, do them late season, and down on the winter range where you could guarantee you could take a few and just pick them that way to find out what you've got. Does that make any sense, Dax?
Yeah, I understand what you're getting at. I appreciate the concern. I think there are a lot of people that are concerned about elk numbers in the Book Cliffs. And, in the last agenda item you guys just passed, increases in bison hunting opportunities in the roadless area, and also a decrease in the limited entry bull elk permits for both the Book Cliffs, Bitter Creek South and the roadless. So, it's a combination of things that we're trying to do to address these elk. And I did double check, so I better clarify the hunt boundary for those 2 new cow hunts that include the whole Book Cliffs, outside the roadless area. So it's the Bitter Creek South. So the idea of having those big boundaries was just that hunters are going to distribute where elk are. And so, where the elk are, that's where hunters seem to go to harvest them. I understand where you're coming from. That's one approach, but I also am not super uncomfortable if we do harvest a couple hundred cows in the Book Cliffs. I'm not really worried that we're going to collapse the herd or do something crazy like that. And some of the adjustments in the population estimate had to do with plugging real data in from the studies that we're doing. And so some of those adjustments and the reduction in the numbers are maybe more of a correction in our estimate, more so than an actual decline in the population, too. Just want to make that clear as well.
Brad Crompton, this is Jeff. Does this mirror what we're having on our side of the river?
If I understand your question, if elk numbers being stagnant and things like that, is that what you're asking?
Yes, sir.
In a similar way, yeah. A poor calf production. We don't have the survival data. We don't, have collars on any animals on the 9-mile unit. But yeah, we've had really poor calf production for a number of years and no herd growth with very, very little cow harvest.
So I guess probably one thing we would have in common is buffalo on our elk winter range. That's a yes.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, I would say on the Book Cliff side, I don't think that's so much the issue. Those bison over on the Book Cliff side of the river tend to stay higher in the winter. There's some of them that come down on the winter range, but we're talking 100 head of bison that come down onto our stuff where there might be overlap with elk winter range. So and part of the forage analysis that Book Cliffs working group did, the bison, the forage that the bison are taking actually turned out to be a relatively small amount of the pressure on the forage in the unit when you compare it to the numbers of feral horses and domestic livestock and elk and deer and the other things that are eating the bison were actually a pretty small percentage.
Okay.
Do I have any more comments, questions? We're in the comment phase, right? Yeah. Yes. Sorry, yeah.
I have one more question, Tricia.
Okay.
If that's okay. This is just open-ended to the division. Is there any talk going on with the federal government, with the BLM specifically, about getting rid of the horses that are, these are feral horses. Let's not mince words. There are no Mustangs in Utah. They were gone before World War II. and these are just feral horses. And I mean, they're crowding out and they're creating a nuisance and a lot of problem. And they may be, and I believe they are a large part of the problem we have especially in the Book Cliffs. And I'm just wondering, is there any discussion going on with something about getting them, at least get them off of the state land?
The Book Cliffs Committee has actually made quite a bit of progress on this. Do you want to talk about that for a second? Is that okay?
Yeah. So I think a lot of parties involved in issues in the Book Cliffs share those concerns, and we have had a lot of conversations. We've talked a lot with the BLM and worked with Department of Ag and our county brand inspectors. We have had some success and done some work on rounding up these feral horses, these estray horses, in areas on kind of the far north end of the Book Cliffs. We would like to do more of this work, and there has been talk looking at some of the sitless sections, some of the state sections. It is something that is a little bit complicated, and we have some horse management areas, the Winter Ridge and Hill Creek horse management areas in the Book Cliffs, and so those areas and within a buffer around those areas, there are federal regulations that prohibit us from doing some of the things that we would like to do. So I will just say we are working on it. We're being as aggressive as we can be. We have had some success in some areas, but we still have a lot of other areas where we would like to have more luck, but there are some hard roadblocks. The BLM office in Vernal has been pretty good to work with, but honestly, some of the legislation, a part of that, Wild Horse and Burro Act, really ties hands and makes it really difficult to make the kind of progress we'd like to see. The Ute tribe has been a good partner, and they're on board and supportive, and they have perhaps a little bit more flexibility or authority on tribal trust lands, and that's encouraging. Even if it's just neighboring, I think it can help and make a difference because those herds move back and forth so much. So to answer your question, yes, it's being discussed. Yes, we recognize it's a huge issue. Unfortunately, we're not seeing as much progress as we would like, as fast as we would like, but I am encouraged with some of the things that are going on and some of the roundups of these stray horses that have happened recently.
Thanks, Dax. Just a comment, another suggestion, maybe contacting Senator Lee and seeing if we might be able to get him to sponsor some legislation on a federal level to help with that.
Okay, so do we have any other comments at this time? So it looks like we might be ready to take a motion, and I don't know if we have an individual motion before we look at the entire package.
I have an individual motion, Tricia.
Great.
Initially, I was going to make a motion to just completely eliminate cow tag in the Book Cliffs, but based on the information and the questions that were answered, I've learned a lot in the last few minutes, but I'm still concerned with the total number. So I'd like to make a motion that we reduce the total number of cow tags in the Book Cliffs to 150 and not more than 15 of those in the roadless area.
And you know what the original recommendation was? Was it 210 or 200?
235 was the original on the Book Cliffs South, and 30 in the roadless area.
Okay, so and then not more than 15 in Little Creek?
So cut the roadless in half and go down to 150 total overall.
Okay, so I have a motion by Kent Johnson to cut the antlerless permits in the Book Cliffs from 235 to 150, with not more than 15 being in the roadless area. Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, so I have a second by Jeff. Thank you so much. Do I have any discussion on that motion?
Can we just hear from maybe Dax or somebody from the division as far as, I mean, what's the feasibility of the science with a cut as suggested?
I think we can still if we can get good compliance from the folks that draw those tags and harvest to send teeth in, one thing to keep in mind is just because we issue, 250 or 150 cow tags doesn't mean we're going to actually harvest 150 or 250 cows. This is a unit where historically success rate on the cow hunts has been pretty good. It might be 50% or even a little higher than that. I'd have to look at the exact numbers, but it's been pretty good. So, but that's just one thing to keep in mind. If we harvest 150 cows, or we issue 150 permits, we might only harvest 75 cows, and then if all of those hunters will send us in the teeth, if we have really good compliance there, I think we can get a snapshot of what we've got as far as age distribution in the population. But that is just one thing to keep in mind, that just because we issue 200 cow tags doesn't mean we harvest 200 cows.
The other part of this too, Dax, is that on all of our surveys, when we've gone out and caught elk on the bow cliffs, we're just verifying what we've already seen, and that is that this population is extremely old. I mean, Jeff, especially as a rancher, you have old, unproductive cows, allowing those cows to take the forage may create a less productive herd. So part of this is to verify what we think is going on, to say, we're pretty sure that's what's going on. Some animals to reduce those animals that are less productive. Reduce the animals that are less productive herd overall.
I don't know about wildlife, but I do know cows. And so there's a point to where they're productive and there's a point they're not productive, but there's not much of a line between where they're not productive and they're dead. So like I say, I don't know wildlife, but I know livestock. So
yeah, and elk,
I don't know what it's worth. If a cow don't have teeth, she don't eat, she don't live. She don't have a baby, it just all kind of falls in line.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table and a second, and we've had some discussion, so I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call on that motion. So Jeff?
Yes.
Steve?
No.
Scoop?
No.
Kent?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Darren?
No.
Kurt?
Yes.
We have somebody needs to turn off their microphone. Sorry about that. Brad?
Yes.
Thank you. Todd?
Yes.
Dana?
No.
Lynn?
Yes.
Garish? No. Yeah. Give me 1 second here.
5 no's. 6 passes 7 to 5.
Okay, it passes 7 to 5. So do we have any other small things that we want to tackle before we move on to the entire recommendation by the division? Okay, so do we have anybody that would like to make a motion as to the remainder of the recommendation?
This is Todd. I'll make a motion to accept the division's proposals.
Great. So I have a motion by Todd Thorne to accept the Antlerless permit recommendations, the remainder of the Antlerless permit recommendations. Do I have a second on that?
This is Dana. I would second it.
Thank you, Dana. We have a second by Dana Truman. And is there any discussion items on that before we move into a vote?
This is Kent. I thought Eric wanted to discuss the U hunt on the Newfoundland. Is that still something you want to discuss, or just go ahead with it?
Yeah, well, I'd like to at least ask a question. What's the division's thoughts on transplanting those ewes rather than shooting them?
Love to answer that and that. Jace, I think Jace Taylor's on the line. He's a statewide bighorn sheep and goat biologist. I think, Jace, could you provide us with some rationale on why we would want to instead of transplant them?
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of background on the Newfoundland Mountains. That's out north and western Utah. It's kind of a mountain range that juts up out of the Great Salt Lake salt bed mudflats. And the population objective out there is 350. Our last flight that we did that was in January of 2019, and we're approaching that 350 number. The herd's been growing. It's been a really successful, healthy herd for us. We've done translocations off of there in the past. And so now that we're getting close to the population objective, we're debating, the two options of either translocating again or doing a U hunt. And we could do a translocation. It would help the herd there. The one destination that we have available currently is the Stansberry Mountains. Those are California bighorn sheep on both of those two herds, so that could work. But the reason why we would prefer to do the hunt at this time is it would take some time and some money to do the translocation, and that'd be all fine and dandy. But the time would be probably the most difficult. Out on the Newfoundland Mountains, that's the airspaces, Department of Defense, where they have Hill Air Force Base has a number of bombing and testing range operations out there. So it can be hard to get airspace. A lot of times you have to do a long sling for those animals. And then also, when we move the animals to the Stansberry Mountains, there's always a risk that we undergo by moving those animals. Whenever we do translocations like this, some of the animals that we move, as they're trying to learn their new habitat and their new home, some of them will leave the mountain wandering, looking for more suitable habitat or something they're more used to. And so we end up spending a lot of time, either catching those animals and moving them back to the mountain or euthanizing them if they get into areas where there's risk of them contracting pathogens and bring them back to other sheep. So considering all those things, there would be some pros and cons to either one of the two options. But we just feel that at this point, we'd be better served to use our time on other projects and avoid the risk of moving those animals. And so for that reason, we'd like to do the U hunt.
Okay, I have a hard time believing that there's much of a demand for someone to go hunt a ewe bighorn sheep. But
yeah, I think you'd be surprised. A number of other states, a lot of states actually in the West have ewe hunts, and they have no trouble, giving those permits. In fact, a few states like Montana, Nevada, some of them even have more ewe hunts, more ewe permits than they have ram permits. Just some of these places that have herds that are coming up against their population objective. I'm confident that we're only given 10 permits. I'm confident we'll get plenty. We'll get more interest than we have permits. But I hear you.
I think we would all rather see those sheep go somewhere where they can supplement a herd than just be table fare for somebody.
And I think for us, it's just the added risk. It's just the added risk of moving a sheep that then kills a thriving population, and you only moved 10 sheep, but you killed off another population. We transplant sheep when we need to. We don't want to assume that added risk.
Okay.
Okay, so Eric, at this point, do you want to make a motion? Because if you do, I have to backtrack and retract the previous motion.
No, I'm okay.
Okay, thank you so much. So we do have a motion on the table with a second to go ahead and accept the remainder of the Antlerless permit recommendation. So I'm going to go ahead and do our roll call. Jeff?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Scoop?
Yes.
Thank you. Kent?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Thank you. Darren?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Okay, they got to turn their mic, sorry. Brett?
Yes.
Thank you. Todd?
Yes.
Dina?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
And Garish.
Yes.
Thank you. And it looks like that passed unanimously. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is CWMU. Well, I think if you guys need to go to the bathroom or take a break, please, I think we'll just keep moving. So, so let's just, if that's okay. And so if you got to take a break, run out.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Now you're telling me.
I know, sorry, I ran out. I disappeared for a while. Okay, so we're on to CWMU rule amendments, and I'm going to go ahead and have Chris give us the public survey results.
Okay. So we do not have any comments on this proposal. We had 32% support the proposal, 11% oppose the proposal, and 58% were neutral.
Okay, and really quick before we start this, are you guys okay if we let Dax go? Any opposition to that? Okay, Dax, you're free.
Thanks.
Thanks for your help, Dax, and your input. Appreciate it.
Yep, thank you,
You
so
bet.
much. Thanks. Okay, so at this point, do we have any questions on the CWMU rule amendments?
I got a question. This is Steve. And I apologize if it doesn't exactly match what was in the presentation. I did watch them thoroughly, but my question is for the biologist. Is there been a question, or have you debated about asking the CWMUs to pull teeth on their harvested deer and elk? Maybe they do on the elk, but I know they don't do on the deer. Has that been part of any discussion?
Yeah, generally we just, this is Chad Wilson. Generally we just do that. If it's on a unit that we pull teeth for a species, then we'll ask the CWMU to pull it. Otherwise we don't. It is something that we could look into.
Would it be helpful to get that information?
Yeah, like I said, if it generally when we want that information off of the unit and that CWMU's in that unit, then we do ask them to do that. So we do collect some data.
Brad, this is Jeff. Would that be useful to your information to get that from an outfit like ours?
We do ask it of the CWMUs, even though that's an any bull unit, have a pretty high compliance rate on the 9 mile unit and the Manta unit where it's where we require it. Yeah, pretty high return rate on those CWMUs. Additional, typically we don't require that on any bull units on private lands that aren't in the CWMU. It could be helpful, but we're not managing to an average age on any bull unit, so it's just helpful to the CWMU in that case.
Does that give you a pretty good average on our CMWUs, or do you want different information there?
That once again, that data really doesn't play in how we recommend any bull unit permit numbers. It's a statewide permit number, so really it's mainly just for the individual ranch managers and what the trend is on their properties.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? So at this point, we'll take any comments and if anybody needs clarification. Okay, do I have a motion?
This is Kent. I'll make a motion to approve the division's recommendations.
Okay, so I have a motion by Kent Johnson to approve the CWMU rule amendments as presented. Do I have a second on that?
This is
Jeff.
Todd. I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second by Todd. Thanks, Jeff. We have a second by Todd. So at this point, is there any discussion before we take a vote?
Trish?
Yeah.
This is Steve. Just a question on clarification. If I'm involved with the CWMU in terms of guiding and stuff, do I need to abstain from this vote?
Yeah, I think it's probably a good idea.
Okay.
I've really seen that at the wildlife board. So yeah. Okay. All right. So Jeff.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Steve.
I'll abstain.
Thank you so much. Scoop.
Yes.
Jace. Oops. Sorry, Jace is gone. Kent.
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
Darren.
Yes.
Kirk.
Yes.
Brad.
Yes.
Todd.
Yes.
Dana.
Yes.
Lynn.
Yes.
Garish.
Yes.
Thank you. It looks like that passed unanimously with one abstention. Well, sorry, did I say that correctly? Okay, good. All right, thanks, guys. That went really well. All right, so now we're going to move on to the CWMU Antlerless permit recommendations. At this time, I'm going to have Chris go ahead and give the synopsis.
Yep, we had 0 comments on this proposal. We had 42% of the respondents support it, 5% oppose it, and 53% were neutral.
Okay, so do I have any questions?
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
do a little presentation. Between our 2 RACs last week and our 1 yesterday, we had some corrections that were made. And so I just want to run by those corrections. These corrections will also be ran by the Wildlife Board. These were caught between that of east and east is actually, I don't know what happened, how the numbers got mixed up, but they were at 10 tags last year and it reverted back to 2 years ago where they had 50 tags. So that should be back to that 10 tags as seen on this graph. And the same with the other 3 that are there in the Southeast region with you guys is all of those were entered wrong. So those are the corrected numbers. And as you see on the bottom there, that just bring those new totals, corrected totals of 172 private tags, 1,033 public tags, and a total of 1,205 tags.
Great, thanks, Chad. So do we have any questions? Pretty quiet out there. Any comments? I will entertain a motion.
This is Brad. I move that we accept the recommended proposal for the antlerless.
Okay, thanks, Brad. So I have a motion by Brad Richmond to accept the CWMU antlerless permit recommendations as proposed. Do I have a second?
This is Dana. I'll second.
Okay, we have a second by Dana Truman. Do I have any discussion before we take a vote? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take a vote. Jeff?
Yes.
Thank you, Steve.
Sorry, I was eating ice cream. Yes. I know.
Scoot?
Yes.
Kent?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
And Garish?
Yes.
Okay, it looks like that passed unanimously. Nice. All right, so next we're going to look at agenda item number 9, management bison hunts on 9 Mile Range Creek. And I'm going to have Chris give public comments.
Yep. Again, we had 19 people respond to our survey. 7 of them had comments on this proposal. You've seen those. Out of the 19 people that responded, 47% support the proposal, 11% oppose the proposal, and 42% are neutral.
So at this time, and Brad Crompton is here to answer questions if we have questions for him.
Are you going to do the roll call or do we just speak up?
I'm just going to, you can just speak up. So go ahead, Dana. If you, sorry.
Okay. I did have a question, kind of, I guess, for Brad. I noticed that the season date that's proposed starts like August 1st, if I remember right. And there were some public comments as well as I think I remember like when the bison come over, it might be later in the season was better for helping to pack out meat as well as maybe finding the bison. What was the rationale to start the hunt, I guess, in August?
Good question. And yeah, I read that comment as well. Over concern about hunting early. Basically, we try to make that hunt as flexible as possible. It's every August 1st to January 31st. It's every day we can really hunt big game in Utah. The idea behind the early start is really there aren't very many bison there, if any. However, there's been a few rare occasions in the last 10 years where bison have showed up on private lands on top of the mountain. Just they're small in number. This gives a landowner or a public land hunter the opportunity to take that bison, if it's after August 1st, and take care of those issues. Realizing 95 to 98% of the bison show up in late October. Really will be a late October into December hunt that when most of this harvest will happen.
Okay, so if I understood it, it's just to provide opportunity if it's there, but the majority of the hunt would occur in October and later because that's when they're there.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll have to do a really good job in this education thing, just to let people know, hey, don't even bother going till later on. The bison don't typically show up till mid to late October.
And if I understood the proposal correctly, there's quite a bit of education component of this, like the rugged terrain, and there's going to be some requirements.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It sounds kind of weird. Part of the goal of this education is to scare most people away, just because it's a very difficult area to hunt. The getting access permits to either float the river or access the Museum of Natural History property is rather difficult to get a hold of, and just extremely difficult terrain. So we want people to be very aware of what they're getting into before they purchase the tag.
Okay, thanks.
Brad, this is Eric. So if the intent is to scare some people away, what's the thought process behind unlimited number of people? Just you can buy them all over the counter.
A great question. The idea behind it is, we tried it the other way for a number of years, where we use alternate hunters from the adjacent Book Cliffs. The next person in line that would have drawn a Book Cliffs bison tag, and that process is a little bit cumbersome. It takes a while to call these alternates. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it's fairly low success. And you're calling it, you want them there tomorrow, and so we really can't react as quickly. It takes a week or two to get people afield. And really, having this unlimited, those few hardy souls that can do this have the opportunity to buy that tag. We get these tags in the right people's hands. If we just capped it at 50 or 100 or something like that, it go through a drawing, and we probably get a pretty random assortment of folks that may or may not know what they're doing.
Brad, do they have to go through the online course before they can buy the tag?
Correct. We want them to know all of the ramifications before they purchase the tag, because it's a bit of a commitment.
Brad, one more question. Have you thought, because if I read the recommendations correctly, if they buy that tag, they lose all their bonus points. Now, that in and of itself should scare a lot of people away, because I think that, past history, they get that tag, and if the buffalo are there and the Ute tribe comes and flies it and scares them off until there's no longer any access because of the snow, you could have an awful lot of very upset people. Has there been any consideration on whether, they should lose their all their points just for purchasing that tag?
A good question. What we set this up like is in other situations in the state. CWMU moose tags, where you can purchase that tag, but continue to like that year in and year out, but you lose your bonus points. So we just tried to format it after other similar situations. And yeah, if you have 20 bonus points, I don't suspect you'd have a whole lot of interest in this permit. However, if you don't have any, or if you've already harvested, and you kind of know the country, that there may be some interest.
Yeah, Brad, you touched on it, and that is that this is the most consistent way. Right now, if you buy a conservation permit, if you draw an expo permit, if you hunt a once in a lifetime species, they're just so rare in Utah that we don't just continue to give that opportunity out. Now, this is unique in that these permits every year they're available, Eric. So even if you're excluded from the draw, you can buy one every year that you're available. The other part is that's concerning, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands, is Utah land that we have allowed the Ute tribe to come and push those animals off at times to help us resolve the conflict, because they spend a lot of time on the Ute tribe, but they can only do that with our permission. That would be like Colorado coming into Utah and pushing elk or deer back to Colorado. And so it wouldn't just be a free-for-all of they wanted to go get a helicopter and push them back. And if we had an active hunt going on to push those animals back, a tool that we would go to push them back and away from hunters. We would allow hunters to push them out of the area. Brad?
Yeah, absolutely. We wouldn't support, we give those permissions, and we wouldn't do it during the hunt, or, when there's any sort of access for hunters.
So Brad and Colby, this is Jeff. Call me wrong here, but a couple of years ago on the hunt, they did this exact thing, correct?
Yes. Yeah, they did come in while we still had some of those alternates in there.
Okay, just so we're straight on that, they did do this exact thing a couple of years ago.
We gave them permission. We gave the hunters 2 weeks, and it was at the tail end of that. And yeah, but they did push them out. This was, I think you're right, 2 or 3 years ago. But yeah, we wouldn't support that going forward, especially with, there were known 2 people afield, and yeah.
So at this time, we've had quite a few questions. Do we have any just overriding comments?
Trish, this is Jeff. You guys all knew this was coming. We're a major landholder in this. We've lost quite a few AUMs due to the buffalo over the last 10 years. We fully support the killing of buffalo. And we're willing to try this. We've been part of this buffalo committee for the last couple of years, and we've really not seen anything come out of this. So we're willing to support you guys with a few considerations. Number one, there will not be any trespass on private property. That means Rock Creek, no camping, no landing on the airstrip, no trespassing on any property in Range Creek. And I dare say that the other private landowners agree with this. Am I right, Brad?
Yeah, well, I guess the situation might be different if 100 bison showed up on their property. They might be begging people to come hunt on their property. But for the most part, we'll do our best to make sure people don't trespass. Just like any other, general season hunt, trespass isn't allowed without written permission.
Our feeling is we've really not done anything else to make the access any better than we've had a couple years ago, but we're willing to go forward. Brad and I talked about this in great length, and we'll support you guys behind this, but We do want to see this by a year basis. We don't want to see this to the end of time. So that will be an emotion here that we do this a year basis and go forward. We want to see an end to this problem. So I guess we'll just go forward and support you guys on your end of it.
Okay, great comments, Jeff. And I would assume, Brad, that obviously, you know, the trespassing component of it will be a big part of the education as far as delineating private and public lands. And I mean, I think today most of us use technology that aid us with that. So
Yeah, if I could add to that just a little bit, for the most part, these bison are on public lands in October and November. There are some access issues as far as on the Museum of Natural History property. You know, they'll have to have an access permit first. But yeah, for the most part, yeah, these are on public lands. But yeah, we do need to make people aware of the private lands, and they need to secure permission prior to hunting on those.
Brad, let's.
And Trish, I was going to ask, could I ask one question? It's off the topic of land ownership. This is Dana, but I want to just clarification on if you get a tag, can you just explain to me, are people still eligible after the waiting period to go for the once in a lifetime?
No. So once you purchase that permit, whether you go afield or harvest a bison or anything, yeah, you've used your once in a lifetime, your bison once in a lifetime points.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Covey, go ahead.
Well, I think the other part is I just want to clarify and make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. And because we do enforce trespass and we want hunters to be honest and ethical, but we need to enforce it according to the law as well. So if it's agricultural land under agriculture, any trespass without written permission is illegal. If it's range land, need to be marked, posted, delineated according to code in order for us to enforce that. And I just want to make sure that that's clear and everybody understands that.
So Covey, go back there. We have farmland in Desolation Canyon. Are you telling me that we've now got to fly in there and mark that?
If it's agricultural farmland, no, that's
so describe agricultural farmland. This hasn't been farmed for years, but this used to be a hay patch.
I guess all I'm saying, Jeff, and I'm just trying to make everybody aware of what this, not what the division does or what you do or what we do. I'm trying to say state code says that conditions under which it's trespass or not trespass. And Roger's on the line, and maybe he could with some light on this, but I just want to make sure that disclosure and not have anybody upset after the fact. Does that make sense? I don't
so
want to
where do you fall as far as someone coming in and camping on our private property in Desolation Canyon that used to be hay patches? It's not currently being farmed, but it used to be.
I'm not familiar with your property enough. Maybe Roger.
Brad, where do we fall on that?
I'm going to defer to Roger on this. I don't completely understand where I know what the property looks like and how that's defined. I don't know the details.
Generally speaking, it has to be cultivated or irrigated in order to qualify.
Within how many years?
There's no definition in the statute that defines that.
So you have visible marker lines, you have farm equipment, you have everything laying there on the ground. Where do you call that?
I would say that if it's not being cultivated and irrigated in the current year, it would probably not qualify under the agricultural provision.
But that being said, that just means that you have to delineate that it's your private land.
I guess I understand that, but you guys also understand this is a 6-hour ride in to post this ground. Is the state willing to go in and post this land? They know it's private. Brad, I don't want to beat you up, but you know this ground.
Yeah, the awkward silence is that I'm not that willing to ride 6 hours to go post that property. No, just like any other property owner, during general season deer or elk, it's up to the property owner to post his property. So to assure there's that can be prosecuted, if someone trespasses.
And Jeff, I said that not to frustrate you, but just to give you full disclosure. I just don't want.
I get
I
it,
don't.
Colby, but you guys have got to understand this is way too far into it. I mean, now you're going to make me take a day, 2 days, and ride into this property that takes me 6 hours in and 10 hours out from the top of the mountain to post it for your guys' gain.
And
we don't gain anything on this.
At the same time, the reason we're doing this is to try to push bison back off of private lands and public lands. And
we all know the success rate on this is so low, it isn't even funny. Brad, what is your targeted success rate on this?
I have no idea, but it will be low.
It's damn low. It is damn low. So you guys are going to sell a bunch of tags and cost people like me that have 20-something points. Yeah, we're beyond frustrated, and I'm willing to support this for the pure fact that we are going nowhere, and we need to kill some buffalo. But this is beyond where we need to end up. We are beyond frustrated with this.
Okay, so Jeff, do you want to make some modifications to the final recommendation?
No, I think your sportsmen needs to be the one that makes the modifications, because they're the ones that are going to lose when they buy these tags.
Well, I mean, I had a fairly long discussion today with Guy Wallace, and he made it really clear that I would assume that most people going into this one will not be holding points. Why would you ever do that?
Well, Tricia, I tell you, I have about 20 points for buffalo, and I have a better success rate than anyone out there, and I will not buy one of these tags.
Absolutely, and that would be the expectation, that this is really for individuals that are not holding any points, right? It's like, why wouldn't you do it? Yeah. And I think they're going to make it clear that it's a really, really, really hard hunt.
Well, I hope that our education point really drives that forward. I hope I don't get the same calls that I had a few years ago that are mad at me because I will not allow them a trespass to go kill buffalo that isn't there.
Yeah,
so I'm going to throw that on to Brad and the DWR to make sure that education is there.
I think that's a fair point. So do you want to make any modifications before any motions before we look at the final proposal?
No, ma'am. Kill them all.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jeff. So do I have a motion on the table for the management bison hunts in 9 Mile Range Creek?
Jeff, this is Eric. You mentioned amending this basically to be a year-by-year basis. Is that something you still want to consider?
Yes, sir. I 100% back that.
And this would come up every year as a recommendation, Jeff. So that's fair. When we recommend permits, this would be part of that, and we can discuss that annually.
Perfect.
So I'll make a recommendation that we accept the division's proposal with the caveat that it is looked at and revisited yearly to determine the success and the route moving forward.
I have a motion on the table by Eric Luke to accept the management bison hunt on 9 Mile Range Creek with the caveat that it will be revisited yearly in the permit recommendations. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second it.
Okay, and I have a second by Jeff Christensen. Do we have any discussion before we go to vote? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take a vote. Jeff?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Scoop?
Yes.
Kent?
Yes.
Thank you. Eric?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Girish? Okay, and it looks like that passes unanimously. And Jeff, I completely understand where you're coming from, and I think this hopefully is the only thing it can do is help you guys out.
Yes, ma'am. I'm not a big fan of this, but I'm 100% behind. Let's try something and go somewhere, because we are, for the last 10 years, I have lost 1,000 AUMs every winter to this buffalo deal.
Okay, yep.
And to where the state's not willing to do anything and work with us, that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, yep. Hopefully this will do something. So let's go ahead then and move on to the next agenda item, which is managing predatory wildlife species policy revisions by Darren. And I'm going to go ahead and have Chris give you our summary.
We had 2 comments, and we had 50% support the proposal, 30% oppose the proposal, and 20% are neutral on the proposal.
So at this time, do we have questions for the biologists?
I have a question. This is Steve. I hope there was two different proposals with the predators. I hope I'm in the right one. I think I am. My question is about our current status with San Juan. I'm a little bit curious with this spring with the virus and the lack of hunters down here. There's not going to be many bears killed on the spring hunt, and I wonder if that's been a part of their discussion as part of this plan.
Yeah, I mean, it's still developing as a situation, but we have had a fair number of those permits returned, and I unfortunately off the top of my head I can't remember what that was, but it's significant because people can't go down there and hunt. So we're going to need to look at where we wind up with harvest and make adjustments going forward on that. The problem down there though too, and maybe the local biologist could speak to this, is we got so many permits out that there are some crowding issues, and so trying to tack them on in the fall would be tough. So we may have to make some adjustments over the next couple of years to try to make up for that. But to be honest, we haven't started having those discussions yet. So we're aware it's a problem. Crazy year,
and I would agree with you that
Yeah.
the fall there is a big tendency for crowding. So, but I think Dustin Mitchell has a really good feel for that, and he's worked really hard on it.
Yeah, Dustin, you wanna speak to that?
Yeah, I don't think that I'd say anything more than what you've said, Darren. I think that's good points, and nobody expected this to happen, so we're gonna have to roll with it and do what we can. We might look into some different strategies during the summer or something too. So see what we can do.
It's a good question. Do we have any more questions? These are easy. Then let's go into comments or clarifications. Do I have anybody who'd like to make a motion?
Darren, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So
Jeff.
when this falls right down towards aerial gunning, I mean, we're talking about targeting coyotes.
Right.
What kind of preferential treatment do we have as far as pulling the aerial, whether it be a chopper or a plane, out of agricultural ground, whether it be lambing fields or calving grounds, to take that plane or chopper to your fawning grounds versus staying where the UDAF chopper or plane gunner and pilot that are all funded through USDA towards your fields.
So we do have a budget that we supplement them to do wildlife work. We're pretty selective about only sending them to units where we've detected a problem or we feel like we've got fawn issues with fawn survival. Jeff, have you experienced them having to leave and do work for you to go do work
Yes,
for
sir.
us?
Yes,
Okay.
sir. During peak times of lambing and calving, we can't get a chopper or a plane on the ground because we're hunting deer fields.
Yeah.
So
that's something
and I mean, I get you guys are funding that quite a bit.
Right.
How do we split that up to where we're getting what we're paying for and you guys are getting what you're paying for?
Ideally, I'd like to see as much overlap as possible. So we in one instance this year, we actually hired a private contractor in northern Utah, and they do both. So they'll go fly the private stuff and then move over to do our stuff. I don't know. I'd like to see Wildlife Services do that. If that's not happening, it sounds like we need to do some more coordination on those contracts. But that's certainly something we could do and discuss with them as we move into a new contract this year.
I don't know. I'm going to get myself in trouble here. I'd really like to see DWR head their direction and UDAF head their direction.
Yeah.
Because we are struggling on the fact of getting a plane or a chopper on our grounds.
Yeah.
During peak times. Obviously, we're talking about snowfall. It hits us at the same time.
Jeff, I actually feel some of the same frustration sometimes. It seems like it's a resource issue.
And I agree with you. And I don't love what's happening in UDAF probably as much as you do.
Yeah, they're having a hard time getting enough ships. And
yes,
so we'd like to see more work done, but we're limited by the number of people that are qualified. And so that's something we've been talking to them about, but we certainly don't want to short agriculture, but we'd also like to get our stuff done too. So
yes, sir. And I understand they need to happen at the same time.
Yeah.
Do you have any ideas of how you get your stuff and we get our stuff at the same time?
Yeah, other than coordinate and make sure that when they're in an area, they're doing everybody. But we also ought to be, we have some flexibility in what units we fly. So if we could coordinate on that too, I think that would be helpful. But the part of this policy is to look really critically at, where do we need this kind of work done, and we're going to be particular about making sure we're getting the most bang for our buck. But
yes, sir.
Other than that, I think we definitely need to be talking UDAF, us, and Wildlife Services about what the priorities are. And funding is an issue too, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
That the money that we bring to the table is important to just keep those guys employed. So anyway, that's kind of long-winded, but we certainly can work going forward.
No, I would love to see us work closer together and saying, all right, say we're headed to the Henrys, you can hit this allotment, and this allotment on your way to the Henrys. And you can hit this allotment and this allotment on the way back. I think it would be beneficial to all of us, but we've all got to kind of work together a little better than what we've been doing the last few years.
Yeah, I'd support that. I think there's definitely room for improvement.
And Jeff, I think you're making a lot of good points. And Darren hit on it a little bit, but expanding the resource with these private contracts in northern Utah really has been a game changer. I mean, Darren, wouldn't you agree with that? And I think that if that continues to go well, and we can expand that, because what we're really doing there is just expanding the resource, I think it'll help ag and it'll help us.
Yeah,
Because
and
right
I
now
get,
it seems like neither one of us are happy.
we're behind the times. I get Northern Utah is doing a lot of good things, and I applaud you guys for doing that. But in Southeastern Utah, we're not doing so well. Last year, I had some severe predation problems at the Cisco Desert that was on the way to the Henrys and the San Juans, and I couldn't get a pilot to fly over. So, I mean, I get it. We're spending a lot of wildlife money to do that, but you guys need to remember we're spending a lot of livestock money too. Part of our checkoff money goes directly to that effect.
Yeah.
So
No, Go ahead,
get
Jeff. Sorry.
I get part of that as a federal issue, and we need to deal with that where it is. But we all need to work together as far as the predation on the wildlife fields and the agriculture fields are the same place.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. And when you have limited resources, you need to work smart. So we need to have those discussions for sure.
Well, I would be 100% to be part of however we can do to fix that.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so do I have a motion on the proposal?
I would make a motion, we accept it.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion by Jeff Christensen to accept the Managing Predatory Wildlife Species Policy revisions. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second it. This is Brad.
Okay, I have a second by Brad Richmond. Do I have any discussion before we take a vote? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take a vote. Jeff?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Steve? Scoot?
Yes.
Kent?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Yes.
Brad? Todd?
Yes.
Anna? Lynn?
Yes.
And Garish? Is that a no?
That's a negative, a no, yes, a nay.
Garish. All right. So that does look like it passed. 11-1. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're on to our final agenda item, which is cougar and bear rule amendments. And I'm going to have Chris give the summary.
Okay, so we had 6 comments on this proposal. We had 58 people, or 58% of the people support the proposal, 16% oppose the proposal, and 26% are neutral on it.
So at this time, let's have questions for Darren or other individuals.
Something that might make the discussion it doesn't sound like there's a ton of comments, but one on this last proposal, this really just reflects the legislation that was passed this last session. We just had to make our rule match. The legislation would trump anything we'd do in rule anyway. So hopefully that'll help smooth things. Didn't sound like there was a great outcry for questions, but maybe that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Darren.
So if there's no questions, do I have any comments?
I'd like to make a comment. Can you hear me, Tricia?
Yes, I can, Garish.
I just think it's a sad state of affairs where we live in a state and the feels like they know more about wildlife management than our Division of Wildlife Resources does. And I wish the legislature would just bug out, biologists do the biology and let them do whatever they feel like they need to do, but stay out of wildlife.
Okay.
That's a great comment. Any other comments? So at this point, does somebody want to make a motion?
This is Todd. I'll make a motion to accept the recommendation.
Okay, thanks, Todd. So I have a motion by Todd Thorne to accept the cougar and bear rule amendments as proposed. Do I have a second on that?
This is Scoot. I'll second it.
I'm sorry, who said that?
Scoot.
Okay, I still can't hear who that was. Scoot. Oh, Scoot. Sorry about that, Scoot. So I have a second by Scoot Flannery. Any discussion before we take a vote? All right, so let's go ahead and take a vote. Jeff? Jeff?
Good.
Okay, great. Steve?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Okay. Kent?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes, ma'am.
Todd?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Yes.
Garish? No?
I'm holding my nose, but I'm going to vote yes.
Okay, thanks, Garish. Yeah, he voted yes. Thanks, Garish. So that looks like that passed unanimously. So thank you so much. I know this is a really odd time. I know this is a really odd venue. I really want to appreciate all the division, or thank all the division employees for being willing to answer all of our questions, take all of our comments, and for all of you to become or to be involved. I appreciate it. And I think at this time, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, so I have a motion by Kent, a second on that?
Second.
Okay, great. I have a second, so we're gonna go ahead and adjourn. Thank you so much. Have a good night and stay safe.